Hello and welcome to the 77th edition of Dwars Vlanderen, one of the Flemish Cycling Week big classics and the last race ahead of the Tour of Flanders, de Ronde, which comes on Sunday. An important race in its own right. As you can see, we had Omloop, Ghent, Wevelgem, and next up on the cobbled menu is Dwars Vlanderen before the big one on Sunday. Still got a cracking field here in a race that takes primarily the hills of the Flemish Ardennes. As we look at Vlanderen, that is the location of the finish today, or the start should I say. We finish in Vlanderen, just on the border, not far from the border of Wallonia. But we have an exceptionally decent field here today, and arguably one of the most open cobbled races, considering we have the absence of last year's winner Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert and Tadej Pogacar, all of whom will be resting their legs ahead of Sunday's de Ronde. But this race for sure should be an exciting one. We have 8 cobble climbs, so 8 sectors of cobble, should I say, as we look at a rather interesting warm-up perhaps ahead of the race today, and 11 Hellingen, 11 very difficult climbs, densely packed towards the back end of the course today. Some rather interesting sights and sounds at the top of the programme. I might as well introduce Dan Lloyd. Dan is going to be alongside me for all of today's race. We should have the final 100 kilometres or so for you in just a few moments' time. We'll also look at what the Roos offers up. But I think, Dan, one thing is for certain, ahead of the Tour of Flanders, given the absence of some of the big stars of the sport, we have arguably one of the most open races as we look at the winners of the last few years. Before I do chat to Dan and bring him in, let's have a look at some of the highlights of last year's race. One, of course, by Mathieu van der Poel. It was an explosive race with a thrilling finale, which ultimately went to the Dutchman. So could it be this man? Dan, we looked at last year's race. We haven't, interestingly, incredibly actually, we haven't got any previous winners in the field. So we're going to have a brand new winner of this race. And I think many observers think this could be one of the most open races of this entire Classics campaign, the Cobble Classics campaign. And
that's because we don't have the big three here, isn't it? Van Aert, Van der Poel and Pogacar, as you mentioned, are not on the start line today and not competing at Dwars Vlanderen, and that makes it very open in itself. But as you pointed out, we will have a new winner here today because there are no former winners from any of the previous 8 decades or so on the start line today. Good to see that man back, though.
Yeah, Tim Pogacar just...
Thomas, how do you feel? How is your shape?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, yeah, we'll see later, but yeah, I think yeah, when I hit my head, it was a good time, you know, after hard terreno. So yeah, I had 5 days easy, but yeah, maybe it's not the end of the world.
How has been the last week or so? A bit of frustration to miss some important race. How have you been?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to be at San Remo for sure. It looked. I think it would have been a different race for me and Filippo there in the final, but yeah, it was. I can't have too bad feelings about it because it would just annoy me. So yeah, it's what it is. I enjoyed watching it.
And what's today about for you? Is your race to come back at the racing?
Yeah, I think the goal is to be the best I can be on Sunday. So yeah, today is a good preparation for that for sure.
It was interesting to hear what Tom Pidcock has to say, Dan, because he is so refreshingly honest and ridiculously confident. But he always makes me smile when he gives an interview because he holds nothing back, does he? He's just quietly confident about his own abilities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he would have even realised how he said that, but the confidence came across in saying that the finale of San Remo would have been different with him and Ganna at the front, rather than if he'd been at the front with Filippo Ganna, who finished second. And I would not be at all surprised to see Tom Pidcock right up there today, despite the lack of racing since Tirreno and following the concussion protocol, which team boss Rod Ellingworth said that he'd followed to the letter after his crash, the second crash he'd had at Tirreno Adriatico.
Yep, and it's good they've rested him. It was a pretty nasty crash, came down at pretty high speed, had a couple of knocks actually in Tirreno Adriatico. Let's look at Dries de Bont, giving the fans exactly what they want in the start. There's nothing quite like cycling. It really is the most democratic of sports out there. And of course, we are really here in the cradle of cycling, the home of cycling, really, it's fair to be say. I think regardless of where you are in the world and where your national allegiances lie, this is really the hotbed of cycling, the heartland of cycling. And although this isn't a monument race, it's going to be very, very important. And I think, Dan, increasingly important for teams that it's fair to say, by their own lofty standards, which we hold them to account to. The teams like Soudal Quickstep need to do a ride ahead of this one to give themselves confidence ahead of the Ronde.
Yeah, they've been notably absent in their beloved cobbled classics, haven't they? They have taken 18 wins already this year, but they've been nowhere in the cobbled classics, and they'll want to try and address that sooner rather than later. And today's a great opportunity for that, and I think if Alaphilippe does manage to get a good result at the end of it, that'll be some important boosting in confidence ahead of Sunday's big one.
Indeed, we're just looking at pictures from earlier on today. It was a pretty quick start. I can tell you the average speed well in excess of 45 k's an hour so far. We will be joining live pictures very shortly. But first up is a look at the course. Most of the routes for the 77th edition of this race takes place in the lumpy Flemish Ardennes and is characterised by 8 cobbled sectors and 11 climbs or hillingen, starting in Vlanderen and heading east, hitting the first sector of Pavé, just over 50 k's in on the Warenstraat, with the first hellingen of the day at the Vonkenberg coming at around 67 k's. And the climbs then come densely packed as the course passes iconic places such as Ronse, the Quaremont, Oudenaarde for the finish in Waregem. And there we go. Multiple changes of direction, a little loop round the finish. It's a different finishing circuit than last year. It goes in the other direction, and as you can see, they do not pass through the finishing line. They just flick off the course and they'll pick up a tailwind. The wind today moving from south to north, about 15 to 20 k's now, with gusts of 30 kilometres an hour. A relatively mild day, especially when you compare it to what the rods have been through over the last couple of days. I'm speaking in particular of Ghent-Wevelgem, which was held in absolutely atrocious conditions. But these are live pictures now. The gap on our group in front, 1 minute and 48 seconds, 94 k's to go. And a quick roll call of the riders who've managed to infiltrate this front move. Notable name at the back there is, of course, Alexander Kristoff. We've got Leon Heinzke, Oya Lazcano, Yevgeny Gidic, Nicholas Stukowski and Ward van Hoof. More about the protagonists so far in a few moments' time. So the race well and truly underway. Dan, that was the deafening roar of the fans who are at the side of the road. It is a beautiful place to watch cycling, whether it's dwars, whether it's Ghent-Wevelgem, whether it's the Ronde on Sunday. Both of us have ridden extensively in this area. We love this area. It really is the cradle of cycling, isn't it?
It is, and amazing to see how many people come out to watch on the roadside on a Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. Let's not forget. I mean, this is not a national holiday in Belgium, but it's a national sport in Belgium, and so the support on the roadside is always incredible and will be off the charts on Sunday for the Ronde. This is the Côte de Trieux, or the Nocteberg, which the breakaway riders have just passed, so they'll be onto the Ronde van Vlaanderen Strat fairly soon. We don't do a lot of the famous climbs, even though we're in the vicinity today, so no Quaremont, no Ekenberg, no Tijmenberg, no Paterberg, etc., etc. But nevertheless, this central part of the race is extremely hard. It's been a long time. We were looking earlier whilst researching, Matt, weren't we? The last time we had a group larger than about 6 riders, and it was back in 2016. So although we've got a lot of sprinters here, and although all of the current cobbled classics are the ones that we've had, is probably the most likely to finish in some sort of bunch sprint, this one in Kuurne, it's far from guaranteed. And in fact, with the wind conditions and the direction of that wind, I would estimate that today is also going to be a small group fighting it out at the finish. No doubt I'll be proved wrong now.
Yep. A completely different weather condition, as you can see. This is a bit of a display by Trek Segafredo on the front. They brought a very, very strong team here. Mads Pedersen riding well, top 10 the other day. Bit of a shake of the head there from Dries de Bont, the former Belgian champion. And as you can see, they've, I say almost come to a grinding halt. They have come to a grinding halt. The way that Trek were riding there, they're essentially blocking the road. The gap has gone up. It did top out at around 3.5 minutes. It's now down to 2 minutes and 4 seconds. Dan, why do you think Trek Segafredo got pretty much every single rider right across the road and riding at such a slow pace. It's quite an interesting one.
It's how things used to be ridden all the time before we had the likes of Van Aert and Van der Poel and the people that were quite. See, this is exactly what we planned on doing when I had my now infamous crash on this corner that they're coming up to now.
We
wanted to go as hard as possible over the top, try and catch others out by surprise. And that day we were going into the Oude Quaremont. But this is an important section coming up, because from here on in, they'll go onto a big road very, very briefly and then back into smaller roads. But for the next 20 kilometres or so, they have got a block tailwind. So it's going to be extremely fast. Trek Segafredo had their complete team there at the front, and I'd imagine they're going to drill it over this next 10 kilometres or so and see what the damage is.
Well, exactly. They've done exactly that. I asked a question, you answered it, and they've delivered. So a pretty good pundit start, Dan, but they are really drilling it here on the front, and Trek Segafredo have got a good team. Mads Pedersen, as we mentioned, Emmons Liepins, Mateusz Wacek, Dan Hull, Alex Kirsch, Sturven and Edward Turns.
And they're all coming through, Matt. So this is Sturven on the front now, Mads Pedersen behind. So it's not as though they're two team leaders that just sat in the wheels waiting for their domestiques to do the work. This is the point that they've circled in their road book, like, right, we're going to accelerate and sprint over the top of that climb, have a look round in 2 or 3 kilometres time and see what the damage is.
They've got John Degenkolb in the mix there as well. One rider's just suffered. That is Kevin Geniet. Very good utility rider, Luxembourg, a former Luxembourg champion. That's the last place that you want to get any sort of mechanical. But look at the pace that's picked up here. That was, I don't think I've ever seen that happen for quite a long time. A team literally slowing down to almost like a snail pace, causing that concertina effect, and then attacking and straight over the top. And look at the damage they've caused already.
Yeah. I want to say it's old school at this point, because
I think it is, though. I think you're quite
with
right.
the big riders around, you normally get a team that wants to romp up the climb, do the damage because they know they're so strong. But this was the old school way of doing it. Often the climbs weren't ridden that hard, and it was the bits in between on the way into the climbs and over the top where you could do a huge amount of damage. And that's exactly what Trek Segafredo are doing. So this is the road, I believe, where in the Tour of Flanders they will be turning left down to the Paterberg. It's the left turn that you can see just there. On this occasion for dwars door Vlanderen, they will carry on in this direction for quite some time now, and it's not that long before they get onto the next climb of the day. That's the Kortekeer. After the Kortekeer, it's straight onto the Maria Borrestrat, a cobbled section which they do twice. So they come thick and fast in this point of the course.
They certainly do. The next climb comes at 85.4 k's to go. Only 4 k's until that point, and the heat is really on. But if you're watching what should be a spectacular race on GCN Plus, uninterrupted coverage, and just look at that beautiful sight there, a wonderful heli shot of the peloton fragmenting in the wind under the impetus of one team, Trek Segafredo. Beautiful shot earlier on, as Dan had called it, old school tactics, essentially riding at almost walking pace and over the top, accelerating, using the whole squad, including their team leaders, and trying to rip this field apart. A couple of very, very strong riders moving to the front. One rider in particular who you'd imagine would want to show something ahead of the Tour of Flanders is Soudal Quickstep's Julian Alaphilippe. A quiet year so far, although he has had a win on the board. He said at the top of the show they have had 18 wins, but I think this is a really important rendezvous for them. Just see Tim Merlier moving up the outside as well. Look at the speed, the impression you get here, the speed they're riding at, well in excess of 60 k's an hour here.
Yeah, I'd say probably oh, no, you're right. I was about to say above 70. Well, there we go. 69.
There we go.
No, 76. It's just catching up with their actual speed, but that is hugely fast.
But look at the damage, Dan. Look at the way this is split now.
Yeah, it's great to see, because the races over the last 5, 6, 7 years have been, I would say, raced so differently, and you could only be at the front if you were the strongest, rather than being almost as strong as some of the best, but being a little bit more clever than they were in the way that you're riding and positioning. They do have to be careful, though, here, Trek Segafredo, because if you look at the big names that they've got on their wheels who haven't done a turn on the front, you mentioned Alaphilippe, we've seen Ben Turner up there, I think Tim Wellens was there or thereabouts as well. A lot of the big favourites are still on the wheel of Trek Segafredo and haven't done anything in the wind. So in using a Jasper Sturven on the front now, in using a former world champion, Mads Pedersen, they need to make sure they don't put too much into it, that when it comes to this next climb of the Kortekeer or the next cobbled section of the Maria Borrestrat, they don't run out of legs.
Yeah, very, very interesting indeed. But it's worth saying, though, Dan, although You've got some of the team leaders riding. Pedersen happily to do turns on the front there. You'd imagine he would be the out-and-out team leader, although turns is going well. So is Jesper Sturven. Sometimes to invest a little bit at the front, you don't have to do efforts like this at the back. You're always on the front foot dictating, and that is something I think that Soudal Quickstep, I think it's going to be discussed ad infinitum post-Roubaix, I think, depending on what results we have over the next few weeks. There's a new world order in terms of who dictates the race now, isn't there?
There is, and of course Jumbo-Visma have won every single cobbled race, cobbled classic, should we say, so far this year in Belgium. Do you remember when we first came on air and Dries de Bont was shaking his head? And the reason he was shaking his head is because he looked up front and saw people with their feet on the floor because Trek Segafredo had stalled it and somebody unclipped their foot. Dries de Bont at this point is going to be a good 1 minute and 30 seconds down. That's probably why he was shaking his head. He might have had an instinct, maybe a knowledge of what was going to happen at the front over the top there, and just knew he was going to be well out of the picture by the time they came down the other side.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. 87 k's to go. But welcome back to our broader family. There's been so much action in the 10 minutes that we've been on air that I haven't really had a proper opportunity to name check the riders out in front who did enjoy a lead of around 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So let's just go through the riders out in front. The man on the back there from Movistar, and what a year Movistar have had so far. I think one of the teams that have quite definitively transformed the way they race. Even with the retirement of the talismanic Alejandro Valverde, they do look to be a completely different setup. And this is like Lewis Askey. Excuse me for interrupting again. This is the beauty of these races. Looking at a lot of Citroën 2 CVs there in a quite an interesting formation. But Lewis Askey has just chipped off the front there. Groupama FDJ, they've got a great team here, Dan. That's a good move by Askey.
You can always tell how strong the teams are by how many we've highlighted. And I think both of us with Groupama have got at least 5 riders highlighted from that squad. Askey's been on great form recently as well, hasn't he? Had a couple of top 10s in some decent races and on the attack at some crucial moments. It's actually not a bad place to go, but he would have liked to have had at least one rider go with him, if not 2. But you can see there's been another lull in pace deliberately by Trek Segafredo. They know that they've done some damage. They've really put the hurt on a lot of riders who were caught out of position behind. They can now afford to relax again and wait for the next moment they have planned to go. But Lewis Askey could build up a lead very quickly of 30 seconds. It's going to be difficult for him to get across to this group on his own, still being 2 minutes up the road as we speak. But if he does get up the road and things happen behind with the likes of Pidcock, Alaphilippe, Mats Pedersen, whoever it might be, the real big guns from this race, he might find that he's swept up by a really elite group, which he might not have made had he stayed in that group.
Yep. No, it's just so they eased off. It's a good time to go, but as you say, he's got the no small task of trying to get across this gap. So finally, I might have a chance to give you a roll call out in front. Yevgeny Gidic is there for Astana. He is the Kazakh national road race champion. You can see one of 9 national road race champions as we look in stark contrast to the group behind. Again, they've really knocked this off. I tell you what, Dan, just again, I will get through the list of riders out in front, but I think
you haven't got that long.
I haven't got that long, but I just find, I don't think for a while I've seen racing quite like that. This is very, very old school. They've knocked it off completely. Pretty much everybody who is detached has now got back on again. The race, as it does in this neck of the woods, has changed direction again. But nobody else is really taking things up. Everybody's got back on. What's the purpose of that? They didn't continue to ride. Was it because nobody else was riding with them? Or do you think it is their strategic plan to do this again at the next point when they can, when it opens up?
You can see them all across the front here. Turns there on the right, then Pedersen, Kirsch there, the 3 that we had on our picture a few moments ago. They've got control of this race right now. That's not to say that they're going to have control in another 10 kilometres or so time. Dan Uhl on the left-hand side there as well, because you can see a lot of the big names right behind them. Alaphilippe, Tim Merlier, the Belgian champion. John Degenkolb, good to see him right up towards the front in the black of Team DSM. Oof. The Brazilian champion of Team Movistar, number 132, has obviously hit the deck, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's not very nice at all. As we say in cycling, it looks like he's gone agricultural. Thankfully, looking at the lack of scuffing, it looks like he's had a relatively soft landing in a field. As you can just see the pace. Again, right at the back, you get this concertina effect. Riders almost reduced to a walking pace. And I wonder if they'll, Trek Segafredo I'm talking about, will kick things off just over the top. But the breakaway in front, Yevgeny Gidic, the Kazakh champion, Oya Lazcano
how slow
of Spain. Yeah, they've really knocked off. It's almost as if they're coiling a spring, Dan. Like coiling the spring and then just letting it go straight over the top. Again, my point before was I don't think I've seen this tactic employed over the last couple of years. I haven't seen a team riding in this way, and no other team minded to actually infiltrate and change the way they're doing it. And I don't think they feel that there's any threat posed out in front, although I think when we drill down into this breakaway, we've got Leon Heinzke there of Team DSM, the German, Nicholas Zukowski of Q36.5 Pro Cycling Team, the Canadian, Ward van Hoof of Belgium, running for Team Flanders Baloise, the local man, as we hit another cobbled section.
Yeah, it's the Maria Borastrat. So in a second, I'm pretty sure we'll see Trek Segafredo do exactly the same thing, because they take a left turn at the end of the small road they're on, that we saw them on a moment ago. They're onto the N60, which is a big, wide main road. I think they'll open it up down there because they're only on it for a very short period of time before they take a right turn into the Maria Borastrat, which is downhill to start with and then starts to kick up towards the end of that cobbled section. So this is the first part of the left-hand turn, and shortly they'll be onto the main road itself. And here we go. Trek Segafredo once again drilling it, and they'll do this all the way down to the Maria Borastrat.
Yeah, that was Bert van Lerberg that just clipped off the front. I'm not too sure if it didn't look like he was pressing on particularly hard, but they're doing it again, this real staccato style of racing. Van Lerberg takes a feed. If he looks over his shoulder, he will see Trek Segafredo absolutely drilling it again. I'm going to use some old school terminology because that's exactly what they're doing. Wow, Pedersen nearly takes out John Degenkolb on the left-hand side. Not intentionally, of course, but this field really lined out. This is a very, very unusual style of racing, but I must admit, for the spectator, it's absolutely spectacular. But if you're right down the back of that group, Dan, not very comfortable at all. Again, Fischer's opening up left, right and centre.
It's just I love this racing, as you well know, Matt, but it's nice to see it being ridden this way for the first time in as long as I can remember, to be honest. In the distance, shortly, you'll see that right-hand turn, which takes them onto that cobbled section. And I'm pretty sure that at that point, they will continue to drill it, because along the Maria Borastrat, they once again have a tailwind. And, you know, the wind does make such a big difference in this part of the world. You might not be going in one direction for a particularly long time. You know, it's not like a UAE tour, where if the wind's blowing in the right direction, you're going to have echelons for the entire day. But it does lend itself, if you know where you are, if you know the roads, to sprinting like this and really trying to make a selection. And even if you don't make a selection, really hurting the riders behind you. Great to see Kelland O'Brien up here for Jaco Alula again. You mentioned him earlier, Matt, as a part of the early breakaway this time last year, who was the only part of the early breakaway, I think, who managed to stay with the riders that caught him. I think he'll be pretty confident going into these races this year, given what he managed to do this time last year in this race. Here we go then.
Hold on to your hats here, Dan. I'm just going to hold my breath for a second. One of the riders from Ineos Grenadiers. And it looks like Magnus Sheffield, actually.
Again, he crashes a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, Magnus Sheffield is down, clearly down on his right-hand side there. Back on his bike, thankfully, but this is, I wouldn't say it's the most critical point of the race, but the speed they're doing. Just look at that gap. There's riders still funneling into that right-hander, Dan, still coming around that corner. The gap from front to back has got to be at least 30 seconds as they hit the pave. You can just see on the right-hand side, Christophe Laporte just trying to find his line, not far away from the wheel of Alaphilippe. So Alpecin de Koning also happy to get stuck in with the pacemaking as the group tries to sew itself back together. The gap, unsurprisingly, because of what's happening in the peloton behind, is yo-yoing. 2 minutes and 38 seconds. It's topped out at 3:30, back down to 1:45, back out to 2:37. But this effect, Dan, on the riders, although this actually, in terms of distance, 183.7 Ks, is relatively short for a classic, isn't it? But the climbs do come thick and fast, especially towards the second third of the race. They're really densely packed, 10 or 15 Ks between each one, peppered, of course, with these cobbled sectors too. This is going to start to hurt as well. And one of the most exciting young riders of the moment, Arnaud Delis, starts to move up as well.
Oh, I didn't spot him. Yeah, good to see Arnaud Delis just in second place. I should have spotted him. I also saw Wellens once again there. Gantner, nice to see him here, because he can sometimes struggle a little bit with positioning, especially in a race like today around the Bergs of Flanders. Pidcock up there as well. I noticed also that we saw the American rider there from EF Education Easy Post. Nilson Powless is up there. He's a great form this year, of course.
Yeah, totally.
What will be interesting for me is in another 4 or 5 kilometres time, they will take another right-hand turn, and after that, it's predominantly headwind for a long time. So I can imagine this coming back together. It will give the chance to somebody like Magnus Sheffield to get back on, but if you're not one of the strongest riders in this race, the efforts that you're making now to keep yourself in the race, you're going to pay for later. We see Tim Wellens deciding to try and capitalise on the work being done by Trek.
Straight over the top. He's got Mads Pedersen for company. Filippo Ganna is also there. I think the rider in for Alpecin de Koning looks like Kenton Hermans, actually. A relatively new signing for them, rode at Intermarché. I think it is him. Now, one of the things we've not mentioned about the front group is the tactics. We've got ears on the ground, as we do at Eurosport GSM. We've got contacts in various places. But can you just explain why we believe that Alexander Kristoff, arguably one of the pre-race favourites, had a lot of bad luck, didn't he, in Ghent-Wevelgem? It said he was feeling good, rides well in arduous conditions, but had a mechanical at the bottom of the Koppenberg, which basically put him out, or the Kemmelberg, shall I say, which put him out of the race. But Kristoff, again, tactics, wind. He thinks the race is going to kick off in a few K's time, I believe.
Well, the information that we had came from a colleague called Thijs Markelsen, who said Kristoff with a surprise appearance in the early break. Just got some info from the team. They expect the race to go crazy the second time up the Nocturberg, so they haven't done that. I'd imagine he meant the first time, or the team meant the first time.
It kind of did go a little. It was actually. That's when they shot it. It was over the top of the climb.
Over the top of that climb, the Côte de Trieux. So I think he was right, and they've still got 2 minutes and 22 seconds. We can see how hard it's been in places behind. So if Kristoff has managed to do a Taco van der Hoorn and really save a lot of energy whilst being in the breakaway, he'll be hoping latch onto the coattails of whoever does come across to him eventually in the rest of the breakaway and have the legs to still compete for the win at the end.
Yeah, very interesting move by Alexander Kristoff. Such an experienced rider. He knows how to win in Flanders. Won that a few years back. Won in Milan-San Remo as well. And has already won this year. Beautiful sprint earlier on in the year in Spain as part of his brand new setup. I really like the way Uno X are riding and have ridden. But this man, again, I use the word talismanic. I'll use it again because he really is a talismanic figure within that squad. A 3-year deal. And also showing the youngsters how it's done as well. A rider of his experience, willing to get in a move. And this isn't him getting in the move to open up his legs. It's because he thinks this is the way that they could potentially win the race. And that's an interesting tactic from somebody so experienced, where everybody else is not exactly on the back foot. We've still got a lot of racing still to come, as we see Louis Askey. The French would call this chasse patate, just in the middle, having a little glance around, possibly considering whether it's worth continuing with this. And with the gap the way it is, I would say it is, because there's lots of action now, Dan, isn't there? We've got a drastically reduced field. I do think it will come back together again, but after Trek Segafredo have essentially kicked things off with this unusual stop-start style of racing, once they stop, riders are attacking and going over the top. We seem to be now in the phase of the race where it's all guns blazing.
It is, yeah, and again, just to repeat, Trek Segafredo have got to be careful at this point, because they've lit the race up. Askey's up the road, one of the riders from Israel, Premier Tech up the road as well. And you can see that they're now going from being on the front foot and dominating the race to thinking, well, we can't use all our energy doing that and then miss out on some move that goes and potentially across to the early breakaway. So they've got to be vigilant at this point and make sure that they don't miss any moves that go. We haven't seen any of the really big guns try to do anything themselves just yet. Alaphilippe's always been hovering there, Laporte the same. Fred Wright, you can see loitering at the front as well. I think Fred, like Askey, will be looking for a place where he can try and slip up the road, as it were, in a nice small group that will work well together and get a head start on some of the bigger favourites within this race.
Yeah, definitely. Just look at the way that style of racing has broken up this field. Even assuming that group behind gets back on, and even that one, we have a drastically reduced field. We had 175 starters. In fact, it wasn't 174 starters today. Unfortunately, Alberto Bettiol didn't make the start for EF Education Easy Post, but they still have a very decent team. I've spotted Stefan Bissiger knocking around the front as well. As things slow, Stefan Kung, surely a big classics win's not too far away. He's matured over the last few years so well after that medal in the World Championships. Here's this group behind, trying to get back into contact before it all starts again. Riders just taking to the cycle path on the right-hand side. The road furniture in Belgium and the Netherlands is pretty interesting, isn't it? Sometimes it's not quite as easily defined as riding on the footpath, is it? Because it merges. Sometimes there's no curb, sometimes there is. As there's a little pinch point, riders going just to the left and the right. And that's the distance on the road there. 77 k's to go now. 2 minutes and 19 seconds is the gap, and that equates to 1.7 kilometres approximately. And it is now Jumbo-Visma, the team of the season so far, who are starting to take things up at the front. And Christophe Laporte sits in second wheel. Freshly minted winner, of course, of Ghent-Wevelgem at the weekend. As we look at the full roster of that mighty team. So Jumbo-Visma, we just had a look at their roster, Dan. Okay, they've rested a couple of riders, Wout van Aert in particular, but they still have options in this race. They've got Eduardo Affini, Thijs Benoot, Olaf Kooi, Timo Roos, Tosh van der Sande, Tim van Dijk, and of course Christophe Laporte. That's still a very, very strong team, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And when you consider that Benoot won Kuurne-Brussels Kuurne, and after Giftgate,
Indeed.
Laporte
Maybe
won
more of that
Ghent-Wevelgem
later.
last Sunday. No, I think we should leave that now. It's been done to death. But
I
either
suppose
way,
so.
yeah, you're right. It hasn't got their big star here, and they're missing Van Baarle as well. But they're still one of the favourites to win today's race.
Well, there we go. It's whetting our appetite, getting excited, Dan, ahead of Sunday. But this is cooking up to be a really intriguing prospect. 2 minutes and 19 seconds. We've still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categorised climbs to go. And the highest point in the whole of the Flemish Ardennes, we got the Hotonde, which we've approached it from different directions. The Tour of Flanders actually gets up to that point, but you were talking about it earlier on, Dan, and interestingly, it is used in De Ronde, but it's not actually a categorised climb, but it is in this race.
It is, yeah. I noticed the same thing last year when I was commentating on this race with Robbie McEwen, and we were arguing the following Sunday about how many climbs the Tour of Flanders had, and I said, well, I've categorised the Hotonde as a climb. It's the highest point of the race.
161 metres above sea level,
Yeah,
nearly altitude.
I mean, they'll be getting altitude sickness up there, especially when they go over it for the second time. It is still a climb. It's a main road one, so it's not as tough as some of the other climbs, even though it does go higher. And it starts from a higher point, to be fair. We've got another fight for position going into this next small road. And this, again, is what the Flemish races are all about. Just trying to be in the right position at the right time. You just have your heart in your mouth, don't you, when you see them coming towards and narrowing like that, especially when there's a signpost on the side of the road. Thankfully, everyone's got through that. But it's just that constant fighting for position and trying to make sure that you're in the top 20 without putting your nose in the wind.
Exactly, it's a fine art. Of course, local knowledge is absolutely crucial, as is a strong team around you, and as is the ability to stay focused as well. Look at the speed there as we flash through this small village on the approach to the climb that last year we saw the attack of Mathieu van der Poel to break away, taking Tom Pidcock et al. With him, and eventually sweeping up the breakaway of the day. So this, last year anyway, was a key point in the race. So 2:08 for our 6 riders out in front. But the bunch really starting to move ahead of the next climb on the menu today. This is the approach to the climb of the Berg ten Hout. At the top, we'll be at 71.6 k's to go. And there's that little narrow pinch point there. And just look at the way the riders behind are having to decelerate. The riders at the front are accelerating. And again, we always talk about this concertina effect, but in races in this particular region, it just happens all of the time, and it's so stressful. And arguably, Dan, if you're at the back and suffering, you're actually going to be expending more energy because you're shaving more speed off into the corners than the riders taking the corner in the first 20-25 riders.
Often, yes, and I think if you're caught out in that situation and you're one rider that is expecting to be up there at the end, you just have to relax as much as possible, not ride on the front too much of the following groups, and just hope that other people do it for you. It's something we actually saw in Omloop with Dylan van Baarle going into one of the key sections of the race. He was right at the very back, and I can only imagine he'd had some sort of problem. But he stayed relaxed. He gradually made his way up through the groups, possibly without putting his nose in the wind at all, just using other people's work. And we all saw what happened at the end. And I heard on the What's Occurring podcast that he averaged, I think it's something like 380 watts for the last hour of the race.
That is pretty amazing. It really, really is. Well, there you go. Lawrence Narsson is down. Also with him as well, that was Ryan Gibbons, the former South African road champion. Meanwhile, back at the front, the gap has narrowed ever so slightly. Alexander Kristoff just accelerates himself back onto the wheel of Wout van Hoof. They're just losing a little bit of elevation here, getting a little bit of valuable momentum before they hit the climb. A little bit of a very revealing shake of the legs there from the rider from DSM. That's Leon Heinzke, the 23-year-old German riding for Team DSM. And here we go, hit the bottom of this climb. They'll be glad of that little bit of extra pace, Dan, because the steepest part comes at the bottom. There we go, 21%.
Yes.
That's absolutely filthy, isn't it?
Yeah, and they'll be storming into this and that main group behind. Hence the, or yet another huge fight for position going into that narrowing of the race. And these guys will be very happy. You know, Christoph, once again, he had a plan, as did his team today, to get ahead of the game. And it allows you to not have to go into the red on these climbs. They can kind of take it at their own pace because they've still got close to 2 minutes of an advantage, whereas the riders behind, there's almost no doubt there'll be some kind of attack up here, and most of the others will be forced to respond to it. Gidic, unfortunately for Astana, no longer able to keep up with the pace.
Well, that is, well, he's just gone. Just absolutely popped a gasket there. Tim Wellens on the front, looking around. Ben Turner, what a classic season he had last year. 11th in Paris-Roubaix, up there in Ghent-Wevelgem as well as this race, top 6 in this race. And there is another crash. Who's that? That's number Stefan Bissegger. Again, very, very nervous times. Multiple changes of direction. You do have to be so switched on. As Soudal Quickstep now takes things up at the front. Julien Alaphilippe has been looking, well, has looked in good position all day so far, but there's real cracks starting to appear at the front. Just the pace and the relentless nature of this course, the cobbles and these climbs, just a little bit too much for the Canadian, who's also been distanced as the bunch hit the bottom of the climb now, Dan.
Yeah, all bunched back together again. Ganna, you can see going through shot now, quite out of position for this point in the race. He'll have to hope that nothing too dangerous goes clear over the top of this next climb, because they'll quickly be on it now. It must have been at least a minute ago, mustn't it, that the leading group hit it, and it's now Soudal Quickstep that are taking charge at the front. Alaphilippe's second wheel, has he got something planned here? Looks like it. Yeah, it looks like it. Bert van Lerberger is driving hard on the front. Just see Christophe Laporte moving up on the outside as well. And again, just keep your eyes to the north of the screen. Obviously, it's gone out of view now, but it is Julien Alaphilippe trying to do something here. Remember, this was the point last year that it split. It is a critical, potentially critical part. Jonathan Narvaez also there in third wheel. Good riding by him. Also, Timo Rosen as well. Oh, it's completely lost his gearing there. Oh, very unfortunate for Alaphilippe. Lost a lot of momentum there, Dan. He did, yeah. He was just about to go clear, wasn't he? There was a bit of daylight opening up. Got it again. And another example of the importance of positioning in these races. Tim Merlier is down on the climb there. So that was Tim Merlier. Big acceleration. Looks like the unmistakable figure of Stefan Kung. Merlier still down on the deck there. Looks like he's holding his shoulder or his wrist. Very unfortunate there for the Belgian champion. Do hope he's okay. But not good for Soudal Quickstep. No, that takes away their second option, doesn't it? You could see that Alaphilippe had plans for this climb, scuppered by a drop chain, it seemed he had. He's still right up there, but their second option, if it came down to a sprint, was Tim Merlier, the Belgian champion, and it doesn't look like he's going to be up there at the end at this point. Well, still getting up. Yep. That's going to have hurt, and you just see the rider still gently filing past him as chains come off in that little prang as well. Not too sure what has happened there, but Alaphilippe back on the front now. I notice David Ballerini has just dropped back. There is Nilsson Paulus also. Let's have a look at the moment where Alaphilippe seemingly was in full flight. Not too sure what he did. He looked round, and then it looks like he just briefly unshipped his chain. Sometimes, Dan, when you're actually mid-shift, if you hit a bump in the road and you're mid-shift, that can often throw the chain, can't it? I didn't see him touch his shifter though at that one. Not quite sure what happened, but clearly a gearing problem that stopped him from attacking over the top of this Bergten outer climb. But we've got a lot of the big name rides up towards the front, haven't we? Laporte there in the yellow of Jumbo-Visma, Kung, as you've already mentioned, Alaphilippe's there, Narvaez. I saw De Lee hovering in the background. He is grimacing though. I mean, the ride that he did at Omloop, I thought he was going to be excellent. I mean, he still potentially could be excellent, but you could just see the grimace there of De Lee. He's clearly at his limit at this point in the race. The good news for him is that we don't have a huge number of climbs still remaining. So we've got this one, then the Kanarieberg, the second time up the Nocturberg. Still got 6 down. We still, yeah, maybe, okay, I'll take it back. No, he was still there, but look at the damage that's been caused behind. A lot of the gaps here are primarily because of that crash involving Tim Merlier, and this is Gidic, who is about to be caught.
Stefan Kung looking around just to see what sort of selection has been made. Davide Ballerini is there. Chris Nyland's just winding things up at the front here. The former Latvian champion. Yeah, he's really consistent. Always there or thereabouts. Tish Benut straight onto the wheel. Ballerini also there. Degenkolb looking good. Also Jesper Philipsen just at the back of that group as well, Dan, for Alpecin.
Yeah, he's been looking good, and he's been well shepherded by his team, I've noted already today. Out the win, but well positioned towards the front. He was on cracking form recently when he took that one-day win in Depana, wasn't he? So, you know, he didn't wait for the sprints. He clearly felt like he was a level above everybody else and wanted to reduce things before the end. So it's not a big surprise to see him right up there even on the climbs.
It's interesting the way that Alpecin de Koning have approached this season. They've now got a hatful of wins, but coming into Tirreno Adriatico, they'd not won a road race. They'd won on mountain bike, they'd won some gravel events, but they hadn't won on the road. And then basically every win since then has been a World Tour win. They took 2 stages in Tirreno. Of course, they won Milan San Remo and then Depana as well. But this is the devastation behind this 175-man field, split into several groups, and I'd estimate we've only got about 25 to 30 riders maximum, maybe just a little bit more now, in this group behind, as Alaphilippe looks around and surges once more. So 69 kilometres to go now in the 77th edition of the dwars of Vlanderen. The race that until 1999 used to be called Across Belgium. It used to be called Dwars door België. So only relatively recently has it been called dwars Vlanderen. And now has the last couple of years has slightly changed its place on the calendar and now becomes sandwiched between the Ronde, the Tour of Flanders, which is yet to come, and Ghent of Wevelgem. An important race in its own right, but we will have a brand new winner this year. Who will it be? Alaphilippe now moves, but countered again by Alpecin de Koning, and a rueful shake of the head there from the Frenchman.
I don't think he needs to press on as much as he is at the moment. He's clearly trying to rally the troops that have made this front split, you know, all of the teams that are represented. They've got to go up this next climb after the Berg ten Oude, which is the Canary Berg, and after that they've got a long section of headwind. So I could see this race coming back together a bit more, because especially into a headwind, I just don't think you're going to get a group of that size all rolling through and off together. Right. So he's clearly feeling good today, right at the front despite the drop chain. There are more opportunities later on. Once again, we've got a second ascent of the Nocteberg, which is a climb that I'd say really suits Alaphilippe. Tarmacked, probably one of the longest ones on today's route, and then a couple more after that. So I personally don't think that he needs to really press on, and should just try and be a bit more clever and save more energy at this point.
Yeah, the big attack has just gone on the left-hand side again, keeping that momentum at the front group, which has ever so slightly swelled. Another 10, 15 riders have just moved on to the back. Sorry, it's not Timo Roos, it's Pascal Inkhorn, of course, who's the champion of the Netherlands, now riding for Lotto Destiny. As we look at Fernando Gaviria, again, has already had a win this year in his home tour down in San Juan, and has been sprinting very well and has managed to get himself just onto the back of this big group. Nils Pollitt there at the back, the German road race champion, and it is indeed the mass ranks of Jumbo-Visma who are now picking up the pace. Trek Segafredo seems to have just fallen away as we head back up to the group in front. Unsurprisingly, Dan, their lead is starting to drop away now. 4 riders still there, 1 minute and 42 seconds, but Alexander Kristoff still looking pretty strong as we head on to the aforementioned climb, the Canary Berg, 1,000 metres long, averaging 7.7%. So one of the harder climbs, actually, of today.
Yeah, it is tough, but once again, as you can see, it's on tarmac, and again, they'll be able to take it at their own pace. We've got another big fight coming into the right-hander that takes this group onto that same climb. Difficult decision, really, for Alexander Kristoff in terms of how much effort he puts in, because the gap is coming down, but it is still over 90 seconds, 1 minute and 41. It's a decent lead, and like I said, I have a feeling that this group, if it doesn't split up on this climb, Alaphilippe almost going off-road there down the centre or the inside of the corner there. If it doesn't split up on this climb, I just have a feeling that it's going to come back together a bit and that gap might begin to go upwards. I think by the top of here, 1 minute 20 seconds perhaps, but I could see it expanding back out. So Kristoff has a decision to make as to how much he really pushes on in that front group that's now down to 4, and how much he tries to save energy for when the group behind catches.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is all about the calculation there, isn't it? It's just making sure, and also making sure you don't get caught on the bottom of a climb, and making sure you put enough in just to save energy. Jesper de Boist, such a good rider at doing this. Moves through to the front. Ben Turner out of the saddle, just in his world. Very impressed by Jesper Philipsen. Looking pretty comfortable there in the middle as the group in front really starts to fragment now. It is the Spaniard driving this group clear, Oya Lazcano of Spain. Driving hard, 23 years of age. Won a stage last year of the Tour of Wallonia, so he's a very capable rider and is dragging Alexander Kristoff clear as Tiesj Benoot now accelerates over the top on the steepest part of this climb now, Dan.
Yeah, and a Jumbo-Visma rider in Laporte not far behind. So it's Benoot and then Hermans. Then we've got Christophe Laporte, and then look at how well Jesper Philipsen's going. Two riders from Alpecin de Koning right up there towards the front, and there are a few small gaps opening up at the head of the race. If they manage to get this group clear, 5, 6, 7 riders, then it will be a different scenario over the top. You see Alaphilippe grimacing behind on the wheel of Ben Turner. He can't afford to miss this, or at least that team cannot afford to miss this move again now.
Well, this is incredible riding. Tiesj Benoot leaning on at the front, some big gaps are opening. Jesper Philipsen is there. Fernando Gaviria is getting distance. And look at this, we've seen this so often. We talk about, there was a criticism of the riders not being able to follow Wout van Aert and Christophe Laporte the other day. But sometimes, Dan, it just seems that Jumbo-Visma aren't just tactically astute and intelligent, they're just stronger. Look at this demonstration again today.
They're stronger, but they can afford to be relaxed. Not on Sunday, but for today's race, they've already won 4 of the big cobbled one-day classics this season. They don't have anything to lose at this race, whereas you can see that Soudal Quickstep are getting desperate. Alaphilippe trying to get everyone to work on the front.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
And like I said, at that point in the race, you don't need to work. Just wait to the next climb. It's likely to split up again. And had he waited, had he not put as much effort in, who knows? He might be up there in this
Freddie
group.
Martins.
Yeah.
The unmistakable face of the multiple world champion. Freddie Martins. Didn't look particularly happy there, did he? It's probably, well... an absolute legend of the sport. Now that was quite interesting, that was quite telling there. Alpecin de Koning have managed to infiltrate this move. They've got 2 riders in there, Quentin Hermans, an exceptionally good rider. Second, a breakthrough ride last year. He's a good cyclocross rider, breakthrough ride last year. Second in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But shook his head and wasn't going to ride. That was interesting. I mean, we would have thought with Jesper Philipsen being there as well, they might ride with Laporte. And but sitting up there, that was quite an interesting move.
Of the 2 teams, you would imagine that Jumbo-Visma would be the ones to say, look, Jesper Philipsen's here, one of the fastest sprinters in the world. We're not going to ride
and clearly
with him.
climbing okay as well.
Yeah, but then again, they've been riding so strongly. They do have lots of climbs still to go. So I'd have thought that group of 4 would work reasonably well together. But from what we've seen so far over the top of that climb, doesn't look like they're going to.
No, that was quite an interesting one. But it was for a moment. 50-50 Alpecin de Koning and Jumbo-Visma, but still out in front, still enjoying a relatively comfortable lead of 1 minute and 24 seconds. Just look at the face there of Alexander Kristoff. So powerful, monstrously powerful, especially on this sort of terrain, driving the power. You asked the question whether he's going to commit. He still is, Dan. I think he wants to try and get as further up the race as he can. It's worth investing here, isn't it? And then if you do get a move, say 20 or 30 riders clear, he then can hold up a card and say, I'm just going to sit in and just rest up for the last third of the race. But now we see Hermans starting to ride now. Laporte looks across. Benoot in the slipstream, and it is Stefan Kung and Ballerini coming across to Valentin Madouas also there as well.
Yeah, good to see Madouas up there again. So good in these races last year. But I can't get my head around how often Soudal Quickstep this last couple of years have found themselves on the back foot. That was what they were always so good at, was being on the front foot, always getting a decent rider up the road in groups like this, so that they never had to chase. Their other leaders could always just sit in behind, not do anything, and wait to see how the race unfolded. But for this last couple of seasons, they've always been chasing rather than on the attack.
Interesting stuff, John. Here's
hopefully I hope to find a good legs again on last Wednesday, and then I think we have a good chance for today.
It looks like you really stepped up this year. You're really stronger in the climb. You're still really fast. You feel that too? Stronger?
Yeah, hopefully. We still have some nice races to come, but yeah, this one today is an important one, and we're looking forward again.
And how to play it today, then?
Yeah, I think we have multiple cars. We can also go for the sprint, but yeah, there are some riders who want to go for an yeah, aggressive race, so we'll see.
And we will see you going for an aggressive race like you did a week ago in Brick de
If I
Pan.
have the legs, maybe yes.
You're not scared of it?
Sorry?
You're not scared of it, of attacking?
If I feel good, not, no.
Well, that was an interview obviously taken a few hours ago. And clearly he isn't afraid of attacking. He was up the road the other day with one of the finest sprinters, new sprinters, Olav Koit, and ended up taking the win. But it's climbing particularly well. Looked particular. This group has come back together now, Dan. But Tom Pidcock chipped across to the move, is now going again, a little stealth move, continuing that effort. But Jesper Philipsen, just by his demeanour, didn't look in any distress at all. But we saw Julian Alaphilippe just couldn't follow the wheel up that climb.
No, and Philipsen, I think, has always fancied himself as a cobbled classics rider, hasn't he? It just so happens that his sprinting ability has superseded his cobbled classics ability so far. But the way he's been riding so far this year, obviously he's still going to be right up there in the sprints against the biggest sprinters in the world. But I know he'd dearly like to win the slightly more hillier one-day classics around the Flanders region of Belgium, and the way he's riding, you certainly wouldn't put it past him, would you?
No, he's certainly looking good at the moment. And his team are really on the front foot here. Israel Premier Tech, I think that's again Chris Nylands active towards the front of this group. It was indeed Nylands. Tim Wellens there. Alaphilippe again looking around. There seems to be a certain... Alaphilippe has always been a rider who's been particularly animated on the bike, always looking around, never seems particularly relaxed. That's part of his charm, why he is really an entertainer. But you get the sense there's a little bit of that today. There's a little bit of frustration infused within his demeanour as well. That they are, as you were saying, just to extend upon what you're saying before, Dan. They're not used to being really on the back foot, and they haven't been able to dictate the race at all. They just appear to be following.
Yeah, and there's no doubt there would have been some pressure on that team from the management.
Absolutely.
And perhaps we're seeing how that's been played out on the road now. It's a really dangerous point of the race, this one, though, because this group on our screens now with the race favourites, they've got about 10 kilometres until they'll reach the foot of the next climb, which is the second ascent of the Nocteberg Côte de Trieux. A group could go at any point in that 10Ks, so you've got to be alert, but you also don't want to have to follow everything because you're going to use a lot of energy potentially for nothing. So this is where having strength in numbers as a team can be really crucial. And another thing of note is that the team that really lit things up once live coverage started, Trek Segafredo, have been notable by their absence over the last couple of climbs. I've saw one of them up towards the front, but given how many of them were there at the very beginning of the live coverage, they've kind of been put on the back foot since then.
Yeah, they just saw a couple of them just towards the back, including Ed Turns, Sturven, Mads Pedersen is still in that front group. And after fracturing on the climb of the Canariaberg, it's back together now. 4 riders in front. Oya Lazcano looks to be one of the strongest, driving hard on the front from Movistar. And one of his only professional victories, as I mentioned before, was in this area. Not in this, a little bit further south as we head into Wallonia. We're, of course, in the Flemish Ardennes here, which is just situated north. The Flemish Ardennes themselves, quite an interesting piece of topography. It's essentially a rectangle of land, 20 by 25 kilometres, where all of these climbs are thrown in. And but there's so many different permutations of roads that essentially knit these Belgian communities together, farm roads, that make it so complicated. And even if you think you know the area, Dan, all it takes is a little bit of a change of direction to completely reinvent the identity of the race, isn't it? All you need to do is throw it in reverse, and it completely throws everything. The way you approach the corners, the wind direction, everything. Yeah,
exactly. They can do all sorts of different permutations and directions of climbs, etc. Coming into Ronsa, normally in races you see them take a right-hand turn from this direction, go up the Kliesberg, which is another cobbled climb. Which I think you led out Cy Richardson for a KOM many years ago, for the 100th edition of the Tour of Flanders,
indeed,
or 100th anniversary of it anyway. But today they don't go up that climb at this point in the race. They'll go on the sort of semi-main road all the way to the foot of the Nocteberg and then head back towards Ronsa over the Hotonda. So that, yeah, like I said, well, like you said, there's all sorts of different ways you can go around these roads, and they've used most of them, I would imagine, over the years.
Yeah, they certainly have. It is, as I say, I don't work for the Flemish Tourist Board, but if you like what you see and you've never been over, it's worth checking out. Actually, head to cyclinginflanders.cc and you can ride all of these routes. You can actually ride, I think it's 75 different Strava sectors and measure yourselves up against the finest riders in the world and get a sense of what it's like to ride on these particularly unique, esoteric, yet beautiful roads. Well, things have calmed down ever so slightly. At some point, Dan, I wanted to go through the runners and riders, but we've pretty much touched on everybody because we can see them all at the front. This is the beauty of racing in this part of the world. The racing is on, isn't it? Okay, we came in 70 kilometres done, the break had established itself, but you really do have to be switched on mentally and physically. There's no real let up at all in this, and in this sort of racing, in this sort of area, because there are multiple changes of directions and so many different dynamic factors to consider, including quite often unusual tactics that are thrown at you by teams. So DSs, road captains, everybody has to be switched on and attentive to everything that's happening.
They do, because things can just change in an instant, can't they? Got Chris Neylands of Israel Premier Tech going on the attack now. If I was feeling good at this point in the race, I wouldn't personally be making attacks. Alaphilippe going again. Sorry, I'm shaking my head. I would be following them. Not every attack, but just following moves and just seeing whether you get a gap or not, and whether or not it's worth pressing on and using your energy. Attacking like this, Neylands could find himself in the same situation as Lewis Askey. You know, nobody went with him, and so you're in the wind on your own, and you realise it's going to come to nothing. So it's a lot of energy used for no reason. Again, I'm very surprised to see Alaphilippe following a move from Chris Neylands. It just, in my mind, again, doesn't need to wait for later in the race, wait for the Nocturberg, and just see what's happening. You know, 5-6 riders start to go up the road, follow one of them, but don't bridge across to a single ride on your own.
He was looking across. That was quite an interesting one. It was Valentin Madouat, who from Groupama FDJ, of course, podiumed in Flanders last year. One of the few riders actually to podium in Flanders and finish top 10 in the Grand Tour. Valentin Madouat, I remember him first coming to the fore. I think it was the 2019 Amstel Gold Race. Oh, who is this young Frenchman? But top 10 in the Tour, third in the Tour of Flanders. I mean, he's very, very versatile. But again, Alaphilippe on a flat bit of road into a slight headwind, with still 57 Ks to go, has already been gapped by Tosh Benoot on a climb. You'd think he'd be thinking a little bit more strategic. Far be it from me to criticise the double world champion, one of the finest riders on the planet, but you do sense this frustration as we see another little move go clear with nobody from Soudal Quickstep in it.
Exactly, but no one from Jumbo-Visma either. I mean, and that's the team they should be basing their tactics on at this point. We've seen how strong they've been, not just in the cobbled races, but in every race so far this season, Jumbo-Visma.
Ooh, touch of wheels
that
there.
Was very close, wasn't it? Crikey, heart in mouth moment.
Mikel Honoré there is just about to get back on. One of Soudal Quickstep's members last year. A rueful shake of the head there from the Dane, but he's soon back in contact. That was definitely what could have been. But we only have in this front group 1 minute and 28 seconds now. There is the front group. They're actually about to be joined. Well, that was actually a series of attacks that went off the front. It was an attack of 2, an attack of 3, an attack of 4, and then then suddenly you have 12, 15 riders up the road. Most of the teams looking at the colours there appear to be represented, and then look, they're just moving away now.
And that's why I said it's so dangerous. You just don't know which group is going to get a gap and which is going to just come straight back. You can end up using a lot of energy, which you could have done with later on. Sometimes for nothing, sometimes it works out, and if this group continues to stall behind, let's say EF Education Easy Post run out of riders or want somebody else to do the work, it can just get up to 30-40 seconds immediately, and then rather than being able to bridge across like Ballerini is attempting to do now, you have to put on a full-on team chase to try and get that group back into the fold. So they've still got, what, 4 kilometres roughly until the foot of the Côte de Trieux for the second and final time today. It's always interesting. At 1:26 still, so despite all the attacks, the gap to the front has remained pretty constant for the last 10 Ks.
And just look how much this field has reduced. We had at least 50 or 60 riders that were gone after the racing, or the unusual style of racing, that stop-start racing by Trek Segafredo, and then since just the momentum of the racing has taken over, and every single climb we've seen dozens of riders detached, dropped, lâché, as the French would say. That's a beautiful ploughed field to the left-hand side with a little farmhouse just on the left. That is so Belgian. A beautiful picture. Never really particularly sunny in Belgium, is it? But I think it gives it. But it's beautiful. It looks like a water. It's like a kind of dark watercolour. I do love. Belgium has its own beauty. It really does. It's difficult to explain But it is the racing. It's the fact that these roads are quite humble in their sense of purpose. That the reason they were built was to just tie, as I said before, was to tie these communities together. But now they're raced upon, so it's given them a new life. And especially this particular week, such an important week. And not just in cycling, but in Flemish and the Belgian culture. It is enormous, and especially when we get to the Ronde at the weekend, it's like the World Championships. It is a full-on festival, one of the most important days of the year.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic couple of weeks, Holy Week,
indeed,
as they call it. Just the run-up to the Tour of Flanders, and then you've still got the race in France, Paris-Roubaix, to look forward to 1 week later. It's a brilliant, if you ever get the opportunity to go over and kind of get a sense of the atmosphere and all of the front pages of newspapers, or at least the back pages of the sport, just full of cycling, and the rumours and the questions as to who's got form. And, you know, if you think that in the English-speaking cycling media that Giftgate was a big thing, it's another level in Belgium.
Yeah, it certainly is. And a lot of the big protagonists have certainly have strong opinions, and they're more than happy to voice them. Dwars Vlanderen enters its final 54 kilometres, and there are still 4 riders out in front, and here they are right on cue as we head up the next climb of the day. Been up it before, the Nocteberg, the Côte de Trieux. Next up is the Hotonde. Again, that's the climb they've done before. They're going to take it from a different direction. But this group working very well together. It is Alexander Kristoff on the front. Now, there's the stats for this climb. Steepest at the bottom. Actually, it's pretty steep at the top as well, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a really good climb for the likes of Alaphilippe and Pidcock, etc., to go as hard as they can, hopefully get a teammate to light things up on the earlier slopes, because once we get up into the trees at the top here, it does go back over into double-digit gradients. And if it's been hard on the way up, and they manage to go harder on that second part that's really steep, then you can create a decent gap behind. So it might be that they say that we saw that Alaphilippe was hovering towards the back with the likes of Mads Pedersen, Arnaud Delis. They will move themselves towards the front before the start of this climb. But for me, this is a really decent chance for the, let's say, slightly more pure climbers. Madouas will be another one as well. And that's probably why Degenkolb's going here. You know, just trying to get a head start before the steep part if he's not feeling particularly great.
Well, John Degenkolb has looked to be riding well, of course. He's in this front group. I'd estimate maybe 35, 40 riders tops in that group. It's Tosh van der Sande, I think it is, bringing things back together. Stefan Kung never far away in the dark blue this year of Groupama FDJ. Sews it back together and continues to wind it up. Tish Benoot on his wheel again. They look to be, they know the climbs they want to apply the pressure. Look at the face there on the inside there of the former world champion Mads Pedersen as well. Doing a great job here of whittling this down, aren't they? Just see the first time he's been floating around. Michael Matthews as well, coming back from another bout of COVID. He has such a bit of bad luck over the last couple of years, but Matthews looking good.
Trying to see where Madouas is. It's a perfect climb for him as well, but I think it was Stefan Kung of Groupama that was up there, and he's suffering. So it's Quinten Herman. So once again, the same strong riders that went on the Canarieberg are up there towards the front. And Alaphilippe, Matt, you're pointing him out to me, fifth place. Not able to follow. Neither is Ben Turner, the Brit of Ineos Grenadiers, still kind of on his way back from injury in the first cobbled race of this year, isn't he? Yep,
he certainly is. He was trying to find his legs back in again at Wevelgem at the weekend, but Herman's looking very, very good straight onto it. That's Nilsen Paulus in between. So the job has been done by Tosha van der Sande. But look at the gap that Benoot has managed to open up here. In such a short period of time, you could see again, just as that split was happening, I was pointing Alaphilippe out on the screen as the gap, just in the space of a kilometre, Dan, has been halved. 40 seconds now to that group in front. As Benoot now starts to move clear on his own. Looks like we've got a problem with the motor there. It's caught parallel on the road. Just moves in front of Nilsen Paulus. This will be that 11% section as we get towards the top. But Benoot absolutely flying.
He is. He is, and he was hovering towards the back. He's a local rider to a degree. I mean, Ghent's not too far away from where they are now. I think he would have liked to have company there, because at this point, every team that's not Jumbo-Visma and doesn't have a rider in the break will have a reason to chase over the top. If you've got Quinten Hermans there of Alpecin de Koning with you, that's one less team to chase. Same with EF Education, Easy Post and Nilsen Paulus. So I think once he checks over his shoulder in a few moments' time, Tish Benoot, and sees those two, he's best off waiting for them and hoping that it doesn't come back. Well, they've got Laporte in there as well. So, yeah, the gaps haven't been too big over the top of that climb.
Well, there is Alaphilippe in about 12th or 15th place, rounding that corner as this group continues to thin. Tom Pidcock is there as well. Just at the back there was John Degenkolb, still latched on. Again, gave himself a little bit of sliding space at the top. Just shows the experience of that man. But we have a new group that's trying to get across this gap now. Hillmans in third wheel there, not doing any of the riding at the moment. Paulus looks around, slots straight back onto the wheel of Benoot as we look a little bit further back at some of the riders that were dishing it out early on. That is Mads Pedersen, who surprisingly is now being distanced. Who's that? It's Danny Van Poppel with him as well. So, and they are moving visibly slower than the group in front. This is a good move, and it is Madouas indeed who's bringing that little group across. Stefan Kung at the back of there. Also, I think I saw Jonathan Narvaez as well.
Yeah, Narvaez there representing Ineos Grenadiers. We've got 2 here from Jumbo-Visma, 2 from Groupama, 1 from Alpecin de Koning, who looks like he's going to refuse to work with this group because of Jasper Philipsen behind. Be interesting to see if Narvaez is willing to contribute to the workload once they've established this gap. And now 2 from EF as well.
Yes, Honore, I think, who had that little bit of difficulty earlier on. They've opened up a big gap now. One of the teams that have been going well in the classics across the board, in fact, Bahrain Victorious, don't appear to have anybody in that group. So they just have put somebody on the front. 42 seconds now with 52 kilometres to go. Next climb comes pretty shortly. It's the Hotond again. It's tops out at 49.3 Ks, so only a couple of Ks. You eventually drop down, and then we go up the Hotond. This is where Flanders goes in another direction up this road, doesn't it? I'm sure it does.
It can do sometimes, and turn left onto the Ronde van Vlaanderen start. But they're on there. They're on this main road climb. They'll fork off left to the Hotond, which is also on a big road. It's basically they're going up the descent where Alaphilippe crashed into the motorbike at the Tour of Flanders a few years ago. In theory, this group should work well together, even if Canton Hermans stays sat on the back and doesn't contribute. 2 riders from 3 different teams all there. They should be looking at each other thinking, right, we've got the gap, let's make sure we establish it.
Well, we've got an interview now with one of the DSs from EF Education Easy Post, Sebastian Langeveld.
I think we're in for a pretty interesting race. It's really close to Flanders. It's a Wednesday race. No Pogačar, no Van Aert, no Van der Poel. Basically the top favorites for Flanders. And it's a really nice course. It really suits guys like sort of in the middle classic climbing guys, like Nielsen. Ties Benoot, Pidcock, those guys. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the race. Definitely.
Today's going to be a good test for Nielsen. What can we hope for from him today?
Yeah, he has a super strong season so far, yeah, I think Flanders it will be his first time Flanders Sunday, but we believe that it is a race that suits him quite well. Due the altitude meters, but also his one-day speciality, basically. So yeah, today he's really motivated for it. He's really looking forward to Flanders. So let's hope he can do a really good race today. And yeah, it would be nice if he can finish it off with a nice result. But the main focus is basically on Sunday.
Interesting insight there from Sebastian Langeveld. Real good classics rider in his time, former champion of the Netherlands too. As we get to the top of the Hotond, or the bottom of the Hotond.
All the VIP tents already up for Sunday.
Yeah, exclusive access. And as we said before, this is the highest point. This is a lofty 161 meters above sea level as we look at that elite group that's now moving clear, but they still have a 56 seconds gap to the front of the race. Dwars Vlanderen enters its final 50 kilometers. Still 4 surviving riders up in front and leading at the moment from Movistar, Oya Lescano. The Spaniard driving hard is looking very, very good. In fact, just behind him, after being distanced on a climb a couple of Ks ago, Leon Heinschke also there. Wout van Hoof, again, maybe on the back foot, but has got back on. And also in the mix, Alexander Kristoff. But this is the chasing group. Christophe Laporte at the back. 2 from Jumbo-Visma here, 2 from Groupama FDJ, Stefan Kung and Valentin Madoua, and 2 from EF.
Trentin's coming across as well.
Yeah, and Trentin getting across. And the only rider, well, there's 2 riders from individual riders in this group, Jonathan Narvaez from Ineos Grenadiers and Quentin Elmans, number 2 there from Alpecin de Koning. So yeah, good move there from UAE. I did see Lotto Destiny and Arkea Samsic trying to chase, but this is a very well unified group, and they're moving quickly. And clearly, by the way it went away on a climb. These are the strongest riders as well.
And the way that they're rolling through and off, I could see Trentin not managing to get across to this group, because it's a descent now. It's kind of a false flat descent, and they'll turn left at the end of it onto the N60, which is an even bigger road than this one. So given the gap that we're now seeing on that overhead shot, if they carry on rolling through and off together, it's going to be a very, very hard chase for Trentin. I can imagine him not getting across.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Just from that aerial shot, it didn't look too far, but it's, at the moment, I would say, I know you always chuckle when I estimate meters, I'd say about 120 metre gap that he's got across there. But the way these are moving through, Madoua now rolls through. Again, has been so consistent over the last couple of years. Rides well on all sorts of terrain, as does Nilson Paulos. We've mentioned it, but it's worth mentioning it again. He has really blossomed this year. Some of his results over the last couple of years have indicated real potential, and I think he's not finally, but he is fulfilling the potential that he showed in races like the World Championships. But also there's an added versatility to the way he's riding.
Yeah, he's another rider who can kind of do it all, isn't he, in the mountains or in the cobbled classics. And we first saw that, like you said, at the World Championships in Leuven a couple of years ago. I think that was a surprise to a lot of people, probably even to him himself.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That's why he's now starting to think, I'm going to give these races a go. I'm clearly okay over the short cobbled bergs. So great to see him up there, and he looks really smooth on a bike, doesn't he, as well? Well, I think, unless it was just because he was rolling through after Madoua, maybe made him look a bit smoother than he actually is.
Well, there we go. 47 k's to go. The gap on the road is closing to that elite group of riders just behind. Really interesting permutation, but there are some big teams who tried to make the racing earlier on. Trek Segafredo and Soudal Quickstep in particular, and the gap is starting to open. And you're right, Trentin has raised the white flag. So 47 k's to go, and you're right, Dan. That initial acceleration is always going to bring him within sight, almost touching distance. But the way they're moving this deep into the race, the effort that it would make to get across the gap is nigh on impossible, unless you're a rider like Filippo Ganna, who can just use that ridiculous power. But not taking anything away from Trentin. I think for any individual rider at this point in the race, that was a big ask, wasn't it?
It was a big ask. He needed to get across on the climb itself, and he was still hovering, like I said, around 120 metres behind them.
Thank you, Dan.
Once it goes down the other side, when you get a group as strong as that rolling through and off and sharing the workload, it's nigh on impossible to get yourself on terms. We've got a chase on, though. Lotto Destiny up there with Frédéric Fisson. You can, I can only imagine that Arnaud Delis is still within this group. They're looking to get him back into the game, but yeah, we mentioned Christophe. A surprise to see him go in the early breakaway. Not the type of rider you'd normally see up the road in a race like dwars vlanderen early in the race. But it might work out quite well for him. He's been able to go at a steady pace all day. You might think, well, there's fresher riders coming up, but by the point that he's caught, fresh is going to be in inverted commas, isn't it? They're not going to be particularly fresh by that point.
Well, it's only 8 k's now until it is indeed Frison who finished. It was just off the podium, wasn't it, in Ghent-Wevelgem in those atrocious conditions. Delis is there, Sturven is there as well. You'd imagine soon that Trek Segafredo would maybe put at least one rider on the front. This is what we didn't see in Ghent-Wevelgem, wasn't it? We had one team only in front, and we had a big group of, I think it was 25 riders, maybe 30 riders behind. Several teams had 2 or 3 riders, but there was no real concerted chase or no real organised chase. And a lot of observers, a lot of journalists, pundits have looked at that and thought, aren't the teams talking together? Were they just essentially then racing for third? It's just an interesting one, isn't it? It's how teams, because alliances are different than they used to be. Teams are working more independently, perhaps. And I wonder if there's less conversations than in previous years. Yeah,
quite possibly. I mean, we're not privy to it within the peloton anymore, are we? But the other trouble is that, again, by this point in a race like today, there are very few teams with the numbers available still to chase. So even Lotto Destiny here, they've only got 2 riders to do the chasing for Arnaud Delis behind the group up the road, and 2 against 9 that are working quite well together. It's going to be very, very difficult for them. So this is the lead group. You can see up ahead in the distance, they're taking that right turn to do the Maria Borra Strat for the 2nd time in this race. So the groups behind, gap's coming down very quickly, isn't it? 38 seconds. You would imagine that in the third group on the road, so this the original breakaway, very strong group just behind them on the road. The third group on the road, the biggest one that we're seeing at the moment, somebody's going to try and bridge across there.
On the gap, I'd imagine that's the case. There's the right-hander. Great shot there. Foreshortens the gap ever so slightly. Neutral service tucked in neatly behind. You'll notice the team cars have been pulled out because the gap is now under a minute. And it is Heinzke that leads into that right-hander. Alexander Kristoff tightly behind. And soon coming into sight will be the chase group. So these are our chasers working completely united at the moment. Honore rolls through the front. Tish Benoot, super aero. It's not yet very, very low there. On his wheel is Nilsson Paulus, the international flick of the elbow. Christophe Laporte doing a little bit of yoga, just stretching out his back there. Laporte's so strong at the moment. The gap is coming down to 37 seconds. But I must admit, Dan, the group out in front, considering how long they've been out in front of this race, are putting on a real show, aren't they?
Yeah, they've done really well. I mean, they've taken advantage of sort of the stop-start nature of the group behind, and that stop-start has come to an end now that we've got a small group together. Just timing the gap between the chase group full of favourites and this very small one that's chasing behind with Lotto Destiny. I think it's going to be in the region of 20 or 25 seconds when they make this right-hand turn into the next cobbled section of the race. So it's not over, but at the same time, I would say it's not looking great for this group.
No, it certainly isn't, is it? It's really, you got Pascal Eenkorn. I've noted Eenkorn isn't doing any riding as well, the champion of the Netherlands. So 25 seconds between
roughly, yeah.
Group 2 on the road, approximately. This is Group 2, being led at the moment by Stefan Kung over this cobbled section, the Maria Borestrat. Kung such a good rider. Benoot rolling through behind Christophe Laporte on the wheel of his teammate now. And it is Jasper de Boist on the front. Frederick Fries on just behind him. Going to be going to another interview in just a few moments' time. And the interview, in fact, is with the winner of Ghent-Wevelgem and a man in Group 2 right now, Christophe Laporte.
C'est vous le dernier vainqueur sur les classiques dimanche. Aujourd'hui, il n'y a pas Woods, mais il y a Tish et vous avez encore une belle équipe et on a l'impression que c'est encore
good team again with Tish.
Dylan, donc on a toujours une bonne équipe
avec
Tige et un très bon coureur dans l'équipe, donc on est très motivé encore aujourd'hui.
We're motivated again today.
À plusieurs, vous pensez, ou vous attendez un scénario différent et peut-être un peu plus d'adversité aussi?
You're going to wait a little bit longer, perhaps, a different tactic, maybe?
Je pense qu'il y a des chances qu'il y ait un groupe qui parte.
I think if the group goes.
Plusieurs de Jumbo-Visma, ça reste exceptionnel, donc ça risque pas de se reproduire non plus tous les jours. Faut pas rêver.
Well, yeah, there's a chance the group would go, but not many Jumbo-Visma riders. I don't think we can do it all the time, but I think a group will go on the climb. So just reiterating the fact that maybe saying we're not superhuman, but again, Dan, they've managed to do it. Whatever permutation that they field at the moment, okay, this race is yet to pan out. We've still got approximately, I would say, just under an hour of racing, still 41 kilometres to go, but they have put themselves in a very good position. And if you were to pick two of the riders out who you'd imagine would be in the front group at this point of the race, it would have been Tish Benoot and Christophe Laporte. So, and the gap to the group behind, Dan, is starting to go out now. 44 seconds, I think it's a little bit more than that, but the gap definitely as Frison hits the front here. I'm surprised that no other teams have assisted with the chase here, unless they're thinking, as you said, of rather than trying to drag everybody across the gap, to send a satellite move across to Group 2.
I can't see anyone managing to do that at this moment. I mean, they've got quite a tough little climb coming up. So a couple of interesting points here. The first one, is anyone going to try something from Group 2? Because we've seen how strong Tish Benoot in particular has been on the climb so far. The climb de la Douze, it's a really narrow one. It's on tarmac, very steep in sections. Not particularly long. None of the climbs around this region of the world are. But it is another opportunity to split things up in this group if they want to. Might well try and stick together. It's also an opportunity for somebody to try and jump across behind if they manage to reduce the gap enough. With the gap currently at, what, 26 seconds still, it's impossible to do that. If they can get it down to 15 by the foot of that climb, if an Alaphilippe is feeling suddenly better again, or one of the other guys that's missed out, like a Trentin, but he's already made a big effort on the Hotonde. So it's difficult to see it coming back for me, but with Lotto Destiny doing so much work, and I'd missed that Pascal Encorn is also there, the Dutch national champion for that squad. You know, they have got riders to do the chasing, but they're still working very well in this group as well.
And there's a slightly bigger gap once they get over the top of the climb of Les Dieux. That comes at 38.1 k's to go. In fact, we're on the bottom of the climb now. The group in front still got approximately 40 seconds or so on the group behind, containing Elmans, Benoot, Laporte, Narvaez, Kung, Madouat, Honore and Paulus. And it is Oya Lescano.
He's been brilliant, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been really impressed. But just, again, looking back at that result, I'll be really honest with you, Dan, it's not a rider I know too much about or have even commentated on, but took that stage last year in the Tour of Wallonia, which is, OK, not the biggest race in the world, but it's well earned on a course not too far away from here, and clearly likes these climbs. And this is another steep one as well. As you said, Dan, these climbs aren't particularly long at all. I mean, in many races, you wouldn't even think about them. It's just because of the repetitive nature, the frequency and the intensity of the racing. They really do start to sap the strength. But the Spaniard is really accelerating here.
Flying.
They've dispatched Wout van Hoof already, but also the tenacity of the man at the back there, Leon Heinzke, is very impressive indeed. And they're holding that gap still.
Well, they've
40
increased
seconds.
It came down to 36 seconds. And I saw Lazcano accelerate, and it was almost as though he was going for the most aggressive rider competition. Because I was thinking, well, surely,
clear, didn't he?
Yeah, I was thinking, what's he doing? But what he is doing is using the strength that he's still got left, as he seems to have a lot of it left at this point in the race, considering how long they've been out there. All right, this group onto the same part of the course then, one of the final climbs of the day. See if anyone makes a move. Held steady, hasn't it, the gap between this group and Group 3 on the road. But yeah, that group of 3 up the road have increased their gap just a little bit, but I just didn't expect it to come. I didn't expect it to increase at all from here to the finish. It was just a matter of when they were going to get caught, but they're going very well, those 3.
Yeah, they certainly are. They're going to say Langen was up there, good top 6 per rider, top 5th I think he was in Gent-Wevelgem the other day. He's sitting in 3rd place there for UAE, but they don't seem to be a team with multiple riders in this group. Fries on there. And this is Wout van Hoof, one of the early protagonists. Can he just crest the top of this climb before the group catch him? And then he might actually just hang on at least for another 15 Ks. I was going to say there's a slightly longer gap between the top of this climb, the Les Dieux, tops out in about 600 meters time, give or take. Then the next climb, the top of the Nukuraberg, the penultimate climb of the day, comes at 21.8k. So we do have, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the course where the climbs have been quite densely packed, about 14 k's in between the climbs. So it could be an opportunity for the group behind to start to eat into the lead of the 3 in front. And they've only taken a matter of 4 or 5 seconds off as Quentin Elmans derobes himself, strips off the arm warmers to commence battle. Most riders here are actually in short sleeves, save for Jonathan Narvaez. Completely different conditions than we had the other day in Gent-Wevelgem. I'd say it's relatively balmy compared to the awful day we had on Sunday. But 36 seconds down, they're actually moving away now, Dan, from the peloton at 1:18 now as Alaphilippe takes things up.
Yeah, 30 seconds the gap, just under at this point in the race. And it's hard, again, I keep repeating myself, but it's hard for me to see a way of this group getting back on terms unless they start mucking about in that Group 2 on the road. You can see as well, Jasper Philipsen still up here for Alpecin, De Koenig. He'd have dearly loved to have been in that front group, wouldn't he, up there with his teammate Quinten Hermans. It'd be interesting to see whether Hermans does start to sit back on again at any point, because they've got the fastest rider, I would say, in this group. You know, De Lees here as well, but in terms of the quality of sprint wins that Jasper Philipsen's had over the last year or two, you've got to say that he's the fastest guy in that group. So will Hermans not sit up, but sit on that group? We'll have to wait and see. I'm also thinking about Christoph and how deep he went just a few moments ago to stay on the wheel of the Movistar rider on that climb. I'm sure it's an effort he'd rather have not have made at this point in the race, because we know from our intel from our colleague in Norway at Eurosport and GCN that he had a plan today to get up the road, tackle Van der Horn style, save as much energy as he possibly could, then sit on the back potentially of whatever group catches him and try and sprint again at the end. Not out of the realms of possibility at this point in the race still, but he had to go deep on that last climb of Les Dieux.
I certainly agree with you, Dan. I remember last year's Tour de France, there was a couple of quite amazing shots of Alexander Christoph
Yes,
I think it was
it
the
was
stage
amazing.
that Jasper Philipsen actually ends up winning. It was probably the hottest day of the year, and it was on a real rolling day. He doesn't like the heat so much, but he stayed in the group. But I don't think I've ever seen him, and I used to pull some face on a bike, but blimey, Alexander Kristoff was turning himself inside out, and he is a man that can suffer. And even if he gets detached on the climb, you get him to the finish, and he's out of all the riders we have here, Kristoff is the fastest. You know, it just depends, as you said, on how much this long ride out in the front has taken out of him, because he doesn't seem to be sitting on at all. Every time we've gone to him and he's been riding on the front, he's really been pressing on, and they still have got a lead of 30 seconds. We've just seen the Shimano neutral service vehicle being pulled out, as now another team helps with the chase, Team Jayco Alula. They've got Michael Matthews in this group, sat midway through. Good to see Matthews back on some sort of form, betting himself in ahead of the Tour of Flanders. Timo Rosen now moves through to the front. Alaphilippe happy to do some chase now. This stretch here could be quite crucial.
Yeah,
Dan. It's relatively flat. Yeah, if they start riding here, and if I think Ballerini is in this group. I think Alaphilippe's now running for Ballerini by the looks of things.
Yeah, so we've got a few teams who've now decided that's the last really big climb of the day. I think we've got the Nochereberg as we come onto the course. I mean, those of you who watched Nochera course recently will have seen that it finishes on the Nochereberg every year. It's not a hard climb, particularly as you've got to descent into it, and the cobbles aren't particularly brutal either. But we've now got at least 4 teams. Well, that's a big... Oh, is that the women's peloton potentially?
I think it must
be,
not
a peloton that big left in the men's race.
That did throw me for a little bit. I think you're quite right. That is the women's bunch. Yeah.
So incidentally, you can watch that race. I think it's on right now on our digital channels. If you'd like to watch it live, you can double screen, or you can watch the end of it after the men's has finished in 35 kilometres time. But yeah, we've got a number of teams. So Alaphilippe now committing himself to Ballerini for a sprint, or at least to get him back on terms. We saw, as you mentioned, Kellen O'Brien working for Michael Matthews, who's their sprinter in the group behind. We've already seen that Lotto Destiny are committed to Arnaud Delis. So this changes things in my head a little bit. If we get that many teams working on the front, they do have a chance of trying to bring this back. You can see that the gap's still hovering at 30. Actually, no, it's 40 seconds now from Group 2 to Group 3. But with 35 Ks to go, if that commitment remains, it's going to hang in the balance for a long, long time, I think. But there is a chance of them coming back. Love this place, Oudenaarde.
Yeah, Oudenaarde. We just came through there. We just went past the museum, the Tour of Flanders Museum. In fact, there's going to be a new, I'm not too sure if it's actually been finished yet, but there's going to be a new Cycling in Flanders Museum, centre point for meeting, a cultural centre point. A lot of money has been played in Oudenaarde, a new tourist centre. Again, if you head to cyclinginflanders.cc, you can find out a little bit more about that. But yeah, it's a massively important earner for the economy in this area. As you can see, they more than embrace cycling. It is part of the fabric of this community. So 34 kilometres to go. It is Lotto Destiny who've missed out in the group in front. Therefore, they're putting 2 riders on the front here. Frederic Frison, an exceptionally strong rider, and a rider in good form. Just behind him, Jesper de Boist. And the gap is starting down. Well, it's actually, the gap to Group 2 has come down to Group 1. So it's the status quo is pretty much settled. Every group now is riding roughly at the same speed. But as you say, the group behind the bunch has actually got quite a finite resource available. Once you strip away the riders that are going to try and win this race, you only have a handful of riders that are willing to sacrifice themselves, and 1 or 2 riders who are completely on their own.
Yeah, but quite a few teams, I would say. Trek Segafredo as well, Ed Turns. Either Mads Pedersen or Jasper Stuyven in that group behind. They've put a rider on the front. And the other thing that could disrupt things in this race is the catch of these 3. You know, I still have no doubt it will happen at some point. And we see it so often, don't we? The catch of the early breakaway. The early breakaway are within their rights to sit on. It upsets the cohesion of the group that's caught them. And then the gap starts to come down to the chasing group behind. So lots of different ways that this race could finish still at this point. Which is what making it very fascinating to watch today. I mean, Gent Wevelgem didn't exactly hang in the balance apart from which Jumbo Visma rider was going to.
It was a great race, but it wasn't edge of your seat stuff, was it? It was a foregone conclusion. Ultimately, not taking anything away, of course, from the sensational ride by Wout van Aert and the man in this second group, Christophe Laporte, who ended up as the winner. He's currently just rolling through at the front here. As they come out of the outskirts, the slightly industrial outskirts of Oudenaarde, they will pick up this cross tailwind again. So they've got a cross tailwind all the way to the next pave section. Got 2 more sections. So we've actually got 3 more sections of pavé. The Huis Pontreweg, which comes at 26.9. And then we've got 2 backwards and forwards across the Hooglemmerstraat, which comes on essentially the small finishing circuit. We call it a finishing circuit, but a reminder, we do not pass across the finishing line in Waregem. It is the same finishing straight, but we come at it from a different direction than last year. So the course is basically the opposite loop to the 2022 edition won by Mathieu van der Poel. So gaps starting slowly to come down here again. And UAE looks like they're putting Vagastik Langen on the front as well. 32 Ks to go. This is definitely hanging in the balance. This, as you said, could come all back together. But that group behind...
They've got a few riders. I think it's Mikel Bjerg, isn't it?
Yeah, Bjerg, not Vagastik Langen, sorry.
For UAE team members. They've still got Tim Wellens in there. They've still got Matteo Trent in there. So they're another squad who have multiple riders and look like they're about to start aiding the chase as well. Intriguing, yeah. There's a lot of teams that are willing to do that chasing behind, despite how many are represented in Group 2 on the road.
Yeah, so tailwind. Again, the thing that's going to benefit the group in front as well, as opposed to riding into a headwind. There they are, just up in front. They've just gone left, is the fact we do have this, primarily a tailwind, till we get to Leda. And then we do the second from last cobbled section. Then it's a tail, so it's a tail crosswind then, until we head into the finishing circuit in Waregem.
And we've got 3 riders sat on this group now. Understandably, Van Hoof in the yellow and blue here of Team Flanders Baloise. He was part of the early breakaway. He sat on, but the 2 in front of him are also now not contributing. So that is Jonathan Narvaez in the red of Ineos Grenadiers and Quentin Hermans of Alpecin de Koning. Again, because we've got 6 riders in front of them from 3 different teams, so 2 apiece, they'll probably still share the workload fairly equally, but they will start to get annoyed at Hermans and Narvaez not contributing at all. I
think Hermans, although he's with the gap starting to close, 107 now, remember, so 101 to the front of the race. So they've only got about 29, 30 seconds, and they do seem to be coming down. 31 seconds and 28 seconds. So the race is very, very slowly coming back together. But look at that group. There's not more than 20, 25 riders in that group, and if that, there's also a couple of representatives. It looks, trying to count the numbers, there's definitely one from Uno X. And there's also one from Bora. I can't quite identify the rider from Bora Hansgrohe. John Degenkolb is still hanging tough in that group from Team
good
DSM
to see him
as well.
There still, isn't it?
And I think we've seen Fred Wright just moving up. Fred Wright at the back there from Bahrain Victorious. They've also got Andrea Pasqualon in that group as well, but they haven't committed anybody to the chase. Although we're seeing the gap now with just 30 kilometres to go. It's saying it's going up now. So it looks like Group 2 could be reabsorbed by the main group, while this group are still out in front. So fantastic ride by Lascano, Heinzke and Alexander Kristoff here. So 30 Ks to go. 3 men that's still out in front. Oya Lascano, Leon Heinzke and Alexander Kristoff as we edge ever nearer to Waregem. So another change of direction, picking their line easily through these ploughed fields, exposed. You could just see Heinzke just looking across to his left, and a couple of corners behind, you'll see the chase group. And a reminder of the composition of this chase group, the bunch, or the remnants of the bunch, which is only double the size of this group in front. We probably only have about 45, 50 riders at the front of this race now, containing Quentin Hermans just out of the back there in the blue of Alpecin de Koning. Got Tish Benoot and Christophe Laporte, both of Jumbo-Visma.
19 seconds now.
It's
come down
up
pretty significantly. So at 32 kilometres to go, it was 31 seconds. In the space of 2 Ks, they've taken over 10 seconds off the time gap of the riders in the group just in front of them. So, yeah, it looks like this is going to come back together with the concerted effort of Lotto Destiny, UAE Team Emirates, a little bit from Soudal Quickstep as well. And Jasper Philipsen's going to be licking his lips, isn't he? I'm sure he was happy to have representation in the group up front, but he wants to win this himself. Yeah, there's also a couple of riders in there. I think that might be Stan de Wolf, actually, from AG2I Citroën is in there. One rider from Cofidis who looked very much like the very, very quick Frenchman Axel Zangler, who's already had a win this year. And unsurprisingly, it's been a great ride by Wout van Hoof to be at the front of this race, trying to pick the softest line. Tim Wellens now accelerating clear. Rather than riding, has decided to move clear off the front. An aggressive move here by the Belgian. Doesn't live too far away as well as Walloon.
trying to find a little bit of smooth tarmac to move clear, and this has been responded to by none other than Julian Alaphilippe. But this is a particularly nasty bit of rutted road on the left-hand side here, Dan. Might even be better to actually ride the cobbles here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're at the front, as Wellens is, and you've got a clear view of what's coming up, you're able to avoid those huge potholes on the smoother section on the side. But if you're trying to follow a wheel, it is quite dangerous to try and ride the smooth section as opposed to the cobbles in the middle. Well, we're down to 2 at the front. Christophe in the yellow of Uno X here, and then his compatriot in the breakaway. Now, Oya Lazcano has been the man of the match for me today so far. Yeah, Lazcano's looked very, very good indeed. Just look at the craft there of Alexander Christophe doing exactly what you said, just narrowly avoiding. Sometimes when great triple bunny hop there, that'll probably end up as a GIF on the internet very, very shortly. No doubt cut up by the Global Cycling Network social team. Great stuff there. It just shows you really do need to have the ability to react exactly. It becomes innate though, Dan, doesn't it? It's just something you don't even think about. You see the obstacle, do I weave around it, do I lift the bike up? But it really just shows the skill that you need on this sort of terrain as well. Still got 25 seconds. I mean, when you're considering how hard they've been chasing in Group 3 to try and latch back onto this group on our screen now, the fact that those 3 riders up front, now down to 2, still have the best part of half a minute's advantage. Again, fair play to them. They've been out here for the majority of the day. And I know it's only 184 kilometres in total, but still, with the energy that they've put in, it's an extremely strong ride by those guys. That certainly is a good ride here by Tim Wellens, who's opened up a proper bit of daylight. He's going to be mopping up very, very shortly Wout van Hoof. He's probably going to go straight by him in the blink of an eye. Yeah, Van Hoof is, well, at the end of his tether, completely and utterly spent after a very brave day out in front. Again, Tim Wellens finding the smoothest line. Not that there is too many of them. And this is Leon Heinschke of Team DSM about to be caught by the chasing group, who now are 27 seconds behind the duo out in front. The Norwegian and a Spaniard, Uno X and Movistar represented, should I say. And at the moment, Dan, on this bit of road, they are completely out of sight. So quite outstanding ride by those two. I'm wondering if the chase group with Hermans Benoot, Laporte et al. are minded that there's a really organised chase behind. And on this flat section in between the penultimate climb and the last climb, they've actually just lost a little bit of impetus and are perhaps thinking about the next phase of the race. And that's provided an opportunity for Wellens to jump across. And I do think Wellens might actually bridge. He might do. I felt like the gap was a little bit too big to make the move when he did, because there was a good chase going on and the gap was coming down. And if it gets to 15 seconds, yes, a guy as good as Wellens can get himself across to that group. But when he went, it was still some way over the 20-second mark. I think a little bit like his teammate Trentin, he's going to struggle to get across to this group that's working still very well together. Three more cobbled sections to go, and we're on one of them now. This is the Hypont Weg, or Veg, should I say. Where is Tim Wellens? It did look like, well, there he is on his own. He's got a moto just behind him, offering a little bit of service. And he's probably about 15 seconds off the back of this group, but he's flying, he's looking good and very committed. Interesting in the tactics of UAE there, not wanting to help bring the group across, but just with the fact they've punted, they tried with Matteo Trentin, and now they're trying with Wellens. Himself has actually opened up a reasonable gap here. They maybe felt that was the best opportunity for them. They didn't want to, because there's some, as you said, there's some very fast riders in this group, and when you look at the UAE riders left, they probably didn't fancy their chances. So their minded have clearly been told, I would imagine that has come from the team car, that they need to try and jump across the gap themselves rather than bring this all back together and add maybe a little bit more firepower to that mid-group. You couldn't get more Belgian to scene there, could you? That lovely windmill there in the centre of your screen. These ploughed fields and the wind blowing, absolutely, well, iconic stuff. You can just see that little bit of crosswind there, but mostly a tailwind as we head onto this part of the course. But we'll be turning briefly into a little bit of a head crosswind as we head into Nokere. So the climb of the Nokere, as you were talking about before, they might have a little bit of a headwind, but still, Lazcano and Christophe riding particularly well here. Christophe still looking pretty strong. Yeah, he's been putting some faces, as you mentioned before, but I think that's mainly because the rider that he's with, Lascano there, has been so incredibly strong. Here we go, then looks like an increase in the pace, if not an attack here from the two riders in the front. Well, I say that actually. I looked initially when we switched cameras there that Tish Benoit was about to try and make another move. I think I was wrong there. But Stefan Kung, wouldn't it be great to see Stefan Kung take a win in a cobbled one-day race?
It would. I think he deserves it. He's certainly got the form, and as we said at the top of the show today, this race is, I think, the most open of the cobbled races we had. E3, of course, Wevelgem, and the race on Sunday, the Ronde, the big one, of course, taking nothing away from Paris-Roubaix, but technically not a Flandrian race, of course, although the spirit of the Flandrian runs strong in that race as well. This is the most open, and it's been raced exceptionally aggressively. Very quick pace as well. 44.3 k's an hour, the average speed, but this is looking like it's going to be very hard for Wellens now.
Not going to get across.
It's just too much. It's looking round, looking over his shoulder, and that suggests to me, just the way he's dropped his head there, he's not going to make it.
No, it's been tough for UAE, isn't it? They've been caught on the back foot, and they've tried to get two riders across to the break, but every time they've done it, the gap's just been a little bit too big to be able to go deep into the red and get yourself across before you blow up completely. It's one of those things where if you do make it across, even if you've gone deep into the red, you've got an opportunity to recover, sit on the wheels before you start contributing to the workload of that group. But on both occasions, they've got reasonably close, but not close enough.
So 24 kilometres to go. Two surviving riders from the breakaway that has dominated proceedings in the 77th edition of dwars Vlanderen. 183.7 k's on the menu. Two more categorised climbs to come. And we also have two more cobbled sections as well. The two riders up in front, Oyer Lascano of Spain, riding for Movistar. Alexander Kristoff is with him for company. This man on your screens now, Tim Wellens, tried to get across from the remnants of the peloton, and it really is a small peloton. No more than 30 riders left, being led at the moment by Lotto Destiny. There they are, just wending their way around the corner. But it's an elite group of riders chasing to try and get across the gap now. Two riders in front, and it's very delicately balanced. That the race, essentially, Dan, is really starting to compress now. 45 seconds to Group 3, 19 seconds, so it's fluctuating 21 seconds. 24 k's to go, still very, very difficult to call, and anyone from these three groups on the road could still win this.
It feels that way, doesn't it? Although, as we've just been saying that, the gap between groups 2 and 3 has expanded back out again. It'd be nice to get a picture and see whether they've called the chase off. I can't imagine they would have called the chase off with still 24 k's to go, but you can see it's Kelland O'Brien in second wheel. Lotto Destiny there with Jasper de Burst in leading the group at the moment.
Yeah, you just see one rider we hadn't identified, Nils Pollitt there, of Bora Hansgrohe, the German road race champion, just towards the back. Mads Pedersen in there as well. I think it is Axel Zongler of Cofidis, just towards the back of that group. Fred Wright is there as well. There's also at least one or two riders from Arkea Samsic. Jesper Stuyven there, just riding in front of Mads Pedersen. But we haven't actually seen them do any riding. It's been primarily Lotto Destiny. Arnaud Delis is still in that group. But just look at the face here of Alexander Kristoff and of Lascano. This is a mightily impressive ride, especially by the Spaniard, as I've repeated on a few occasions now. Not a rider we are overly familiar with, but this has been a fantastic ride by him. And you're right, Dan, this second group, there's enough resource in here, enough belief that they are continuing to ride despite the fact that there's three riders sat on. And they've also gained another. They've also got Leon Henschke, who was in the original breakaway, but he won't do any riding, and it looks as if EF Education are trying to force Narvaez to maybe do a little bit of riding there by just dropping on the back. But
or maybe
23
just
seconds now.
Looking for a bit of rest themselves, maybe.
Definitely.
And just hoping that they it's a little way before any of the riders up front who are working look round and say, hey, what are you doing? You've got to contribute to the things here that we're doing at the front. Looks like Nilsen Paulus is really going for it up this next climb of the day. Or is that Honoré at the front?
I think it's Honoré up there.
He's at the back here. Yeah, Matt Paulus really going for it up the Nokkerenberg here. So this is the finish line of Nokkeren course. It's probably one of the first cobbled classics of the year each and every season. But Paulus opening things up, but not gaining any gap. And you can see that today they go straight across. So they're about to descend down the climb that they had on the circuits last year. They're doing it in a different direction to what we had 12 months ago. They'll descend down, and then they'll have the first of 2 cobbled sections on this finishing loop. And as Matt said earlier, you don't actually see the finish line on this lap. The second time around, they will take a right-hand turn and see it in the end for the first time when they cross the finish.
Exactly, yeah. The final corner comes with about 450 metres to go. And from looking at our vantage point, looking at the wind direction, they'll pick up that tailwind for the finish. So that will dictate the way any sprint unfolds. Unless, of course, we do get one rider solo. Ooh. But there we get to clip the apex of that corner there. Valentin Madwa at the back had to shave off a little bit of speed. Well, that certainly was heart in mouth stuff. A little bit of an acceleration. He'll soon get back on. It just shows down in bike racing, especially on terrain like this, you're on essentially a knife edge. All it takes is one minor error and it could all go wrong, but the Frenchman is back. But that was...
might be the rush of adrenaline that Valentin Madouas needed for the final 20 kilometres of the race today. But yeah, just cut the apex a little bit, found some gravel that he hadn't seen, because he was blinded by the rider in front and very close to hitting the deck there.
Yeah, we're just losing a little bit of elevation again because the wind is coming from the left-hand side. We're heading towards Kruisem, just out of Nokkera. Then we swing a left, as Dan said, and then we do we traverse on 2 occasions the final cobbled section as Jesper de Bois continues to drive hard on the front. Kellen O'Brien, identified by Dan earlier, sat there in 3rd, knows what it's like to finish in the top 10 in this race, was part of the main breakaway in last year's race, and today quite clearly working in the service of Michael Matthews, who again is one of the very, very fast men in that group behind. 47 seconds. It's come down again. They're closing, but it's yo-yoing. The consistent thing is, Dan, is that the gap is just constantly concertinaing. And that could be due to the different parts of the course that they're actually on and the way they decelerate and accelerate. If it was a long straight road and they were within the same conditions all of the time, we might see more of a concerted change in the time gap, but because of the constant change of direction, it seems to be just ebbing and flowing. But it's really only 3 teams chasing here. Lots of passengers in this group behind.
Yeah, it's been interesting that Trek Segafredo have called off their chase behind in this group. They were working with Ed Turns, but looks like they've just all slotted in as 3 riders further back in this group, which is a bit of a surprise because they put a lot of effort into this race. They still have two very fast finishers, really. Well, you could say all 3 are, but they've got to sacrifice somebody. But at the moment, not sacrificing anybody.
Well, it looks like
now one of them's got a puncture.
That's Jesper Stuyven, isn't it? Is it Jesper Stuyven?
I think it might be Turns.
Yeah, that's one of their. That's not good news for Trek Segafredo. The neutral service goes straight by him, but he should have his team car behind. The gap now to the 2 riders in front from the chasing group containing Benoot and Laporte, and the rest is only 18 seconds.
I know it's Stuyven, you're right.
It looks very similar to the side to Ed Turns. Lays the bike down gently on the floor, patiently gets his new steed, jumps on board.
I think you were right first time, Matt. Sorry, it's Jesper Stuyven that's punctured there.
Back on board, gets his head unit back on. And so yeah, just pretty much goes straight on. Couldn't quite tell if it was a back or a front wheel puncture, but the way he took that corner, clearly couldn't take the same line as the other riders. Otherwise it would have washed out completely. But back to the front of the race, Lescano still driving on the front. This is some effort now. Under 20 kilometres to go now. These 2 riders form part of the early breakaway of 6. And now they're fighting to stay out in front, but they only have a slender 18 seconds lead on the chasing group behind, with a bunch of the pre-race favourites. They're piling on the cobbles, but most of the climbs are now done. All we've got, Dan, now is one more climb for Nokkera. So really, opportunities to break this race apart on climbs are pretty much gone. That's only just a gentle drag, really, isn't it, compared to what we've had before. So this is going to come down to a real tactical play in the final. Clearly you need good legs. Still, it isn't over for the group behind. 46 seconds now. Still Lotto Destiny driving.
And again, you know, when you consider the riders on the front of this group driving the pace, another hats off to the 2 riders that still remain out front from the early breakaway. I was just looking at the dynamics and the makeup of Group 2 on the road. And there's so many things for those guys to think about. First and foremost, they've got to get to these 2 to have a chance of winning the race. Secondly, they're thinking about keeping the 3rd group at bay. But thirdly, especially for somebody like, especially for Groupama, and similarly for EF Education Easy Post, if you look at the fact that Laporte's in there and some really fast sprinters, you know, Kung not great at sprinting, Madouas again, you wouldn't back him given the composition of this group at the moment.
Even
Laporte
Narvaez
being
is
in there.
quite quick, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So they're also having to think about, right, how am I going to play this once we catch the front group? Or am I going to try and go on the attack as a Stefan Kung to get across to the front 2 riders on the road? So, yeah, fascinating finale in store for the final 18 kilometres today.
It certainly is. With Jasper de Boist and Kellen O'Brien and Frederick Frieson. And it looks as if they are going to be using Pascal Eenkorn very, very shortly as well. Fred Wright not too far away. Just sat on the wheel there of Davide Ballerini. And there is the makeup of Group 3 on the road. It's now gone out to 52 seconds. So 19 seconds in front. The Norwegian tandem, the Norwegian-Spanish tandem have stolen back another singular second. 19 seconds it is. Dan, do you think there's any chance? Okay. And it's a big,
well,
it's a big call.
This, yeah.
I mean, the way they're riding here, they don't actually seem to be fading. It's more the organisation behind, because, as you said, there are so many different things at play. And even teams of multiple numbers in that group don't necessarily have the fast men here.
No.
So they really need to think about what riders they sacrifice. And coming into the final here, given the fact they've got a lot of sprinters behind, with still a reasonable amount of resource compared to what we've got here, this race could all come back together. So soon enough, Jumbo-Visma, Groupama FDJ and EF need to make a call on what they're going to be doing here. And of course, they're all going to have a different plan.
Yeah, and I think if I was one of the front 2 riders, what I'd be hoping for is that there is an attack from this group. It's nullified, and because there's been an attack, they all start looking at each other, and all of a sudden, instead of 20 seconds, you've got 30 or 40 seconds. And at that point, you start to believe we can possibly stay away today from the early breakaway. It's certainly not outside the realms of possibility, given how strong they've looked in that front group of 2 at this point, and given that they've still got 21 seconds over the chasing group behind.
Yeah, well, Stuyven, after that puncture, gasps, breathes in the air, and has managed to lock himself back in. It's Mathis Louvel, who's the rider at the back of that group for Arkea Samsic. But Jesper Stuyven, winner a couple of years ago, of course, of Milan-San Remo. Lucky to get back in there. Let's have a look at a couple of riders at the back there. They're trying to identify. Looks like it might be, is it Boivin at the back there for Israel Premier Tech, as we continue to focus on the man whose family owns a chocolate shop. Who else is just coming through the gap here?
Van Poppel, is it?
It looks like it is Van Poppel. Yeah, it is Danny Van Poppel moving through. So Bora Hansgrohe have 2 riders in this group. We've already identified Niels Pollitt. 22 seconds it is now, so it's going out again. And it's also going out the peloton behind. They had it down to 44 seconds. Moves out. Maybe the first sign of a little bit of fatigue here. On this particular section of road down, they're actually going to be heading a little bit into a cross headwind as well. So visibly moving a little bit slower on the road. And one would imagine, just looking at the dynamics of the chase behind, that this is where the group behind should start eating into the lead. But also, as they're thinking of maybe getting across the gap, thinking of how to win this race, once you start thinking of tactics, generally you're not thinking about applying pressure on the front, so you're riding with a little bit more caution behind, and that's where we've seen the gap go out. 23 seconds now for our leaders.
This could be out again. I mean, this would be a huge win for either Uno X or Movistar.
Yep.
And you might say, why would it be a big win for Movistar? Because they just don't specialise generally in the cobbled classics. And although this is not one of the bigger ones, it's still a prestigious race. You know, as you were mentioning earlier, what is this, the 77th edition of Dwars door Vlanderen? Different names in the past, but it would be a huge win for either of those teams. And it's going in the right direction for them. 24 seconds now, almost a minute chasing Group 3 on the road. Well, I remember this time last year, or just another week or so's time at Scheldeprijs, Christoph took his, I think it was his only ever solo victory.
Yes,
he's kind
indeed.
of changed the way that he's been riding over the last few years, and we all know how consistent he is at the Cobbled Classics, and in particular the Tour of Flanders. He's had countless top 10s and top 5s at that race. As he's getting older in years, he started to think of different ways to win races. And you know, our colleague, as we kept mentioning, was saying that it was part of the plan to get in the early move, to try and anticipate the rising in pace of the peloton over the very hilly middle part of today's race. What he wouldn't have been expecting was to be still out there with 14 kilometres to go.
I don't think after we got that bit of information that that we would have thought, yes, there would have been still dangling out in front, and not with a bad lead at all. Tiesbenoot looks across to see Stefan Kung rolling through. Kung still happy to ride, And interestingly as well, Quentin Elmans, one of four riders now, who has no teammates in this group, also willing to add to the pace at the front. We are now on to the finishing loops. You'd have seen the fact that we've just passed, we went through the finishing straight, but not quite the finish area. So the last 800 metres, 1 kilometre of this course are obviously barriered. But we went past the final finishing straight, which is about 400 metres long, and now we're back out onto this loop again. Still got one little drag to go. Will that part of the course down, will the little climb in Nokura be enough for somebody to try and jump across the gap? But still, the gap between Group 2 and Group 3 on the road, which is essentially the peloton that we're dwelling on here, is gone out now to 30 or 20, 25, 26 seconds, 21 seconds in front. Such a powerful rider, isn't he? When you look at him from the side, he's a beast, isn't he? He is built like the proverbial, isn't he?
He's got some lungs on him, I'll say that.
He is so powerful, but also so experienced. And that's one thing, as you said, Dan, you know, look at the wins that he's had over the years. Look at the fact he's in a new team, new objectives. He's the rider that they'll all look to. What a display here. You know, they've whether this comes off or not, and they've just bought themselves another couple of seconds, 26 seconds it is, to the two riders in front, who are completely and utterly in the zone and willing to sacrifice themselves to stay in front, whereas the group behind are thinking, how can we, I'm worried about dragging the faster riders across, I need to hold a little bit back to counter any sort of move. The mentality is completely different to Group 2 than it is in Group Front. If that such a thing exists, Dan. 20 seconds, 53 seconds now to the group on the road, still being led by Lotto Destiny. I'm wondering how long they can continue this, and whether a couple of other teams are going to at least think, okay, we can bring this back. They can see them up in front, Dan, on these longer stretches. It's essentially a rectangular circuit, isn't it? And there are, on this leg now, they'll just pick up this wind that's coming from their right on their shoulder, helping a little bit. They'll be able to see the riders out in front.
Yeah, it's cross-tail here, and it is quite an exposed road at this part, and they'll continue on this relatively main road to the climb up Nokura. At the top of it, if they looked right, they'd see the Nokuraberg, the cobbled section that they've done before on the lead into this circuit, but they'll be turning left back into that narrow road. I would venture to guess that in the peloton at 43 seconds, whoever's been working will be done up this climb of the Nokura, and it will be just down to the riders they've been working for to try and get themselves across to this group, the chasing group on the road, who still got 23 seconds themselves to close to our leading group of two riders. And like you said, Matt, they're agonisingly close to being able to reach out and touch the two riders in front. But it's never come below, what, 17, 18 seconds at the very, very least?
It hasn't.
18 now.
Well, UAE have now changed their tactic ever so slightly, and they've put somebody on the front as well.
And Trek as well.
Yeah, Viggo Langen has been put on the front. Trek also driving here. And it does make a difference, Dan, when you end up on a stretch of road, regardless of the time gap. If you can see your foil, if you can see the group in front, it's psychologically completely different. You can put yourself in a completely different mental place in terms of what you can do on the bike. It's a strange... it's difficult to explain. Look at this. It's like a runway we're on now. This is, all three groups will see each other in their crosshairs, or two groups. These riders won't see anybody in front apart from the lead car, of course. But we're heading onto this the climb again. Well, the climb comes very, very shortly. It tops out in about 800 metres time. But I do think the gap will come down, and it is 34 seconds to the peloton, the remnants, the tattered peloton, and 14 seconds to that elite chase group behind. Could we, since the first time in 2016 when Jens de Buchera took the win, see a big group sprint? I wouldn't want to call it just yet, Dan. Final climb of the day coming up.
This is going to be so painful for these two rides, because like you said, it's such a straight road, and the gradients, whilst never severe, do ramp up towards the top of this climb on those horrible feeling concrete roads.
Under 10 kilometres to go now in the dwars door Vlanderen. We have two remaining riders from the break that has dominated proceedings today. It has been so far a pretty epic, borderline astonishing ride by Oya Lescano of Movistar and Alexander Kristoff, the grizzled veteran from Norway. As we see another rider just at the end of his tether here, Jasper de Bois has put in a lot of work for Lotto Destiny. We see Mikel Honore now accelerating on this climb. This is the final bit of elevation to offer up any opportunity, Dan, to shut this gap down. This race is coming inexorably closer and closer together now.
And somebody needs to counter, because this is the point that I was talking about, where if somebody attacks and it doesn't work and they come back together, if they look at each other, although it's down to 9 seconds, it could quickly expand again to these two, because once they get over the top of this climb, they'll carry on at their own tempo, their own fatigued tempo at this point, and just hope that they can keep the others at bay and that they start to look at each other. So Paulis trying to counter the move from his Danish teammate Honore. Jumbo-Visma relatively quiet on this climb. I was expecting an attack from either Tiesj Benoot, well, more possibly from Tiesj Benoot than from Laporte. They haven't done it yet. Whether or not that's part of their tactics, whether they just don't have the legs to bridge that final 9 seconds, I can only imagine it's the latter, because sort of dicing with death leaving these two out. I mean, they must realise how strong these two are feeling today, given that they've not been caught just yet.
Did you see the little look? That little look that Christoph gave his Spanish counterpart there, that was a look of respect, I think. There was a big turn, and the way, the body language there from Lazcano was turning himself inside out. He knows if they could get over that climb, and as you say, they're both powerfully built riders with top-end absolute power. And on the flat, especially, and on the flat, although it's ever such a slight head crosswind, they are managing to maintain a pretty decent momentum, which you can do. Even in a state of fatigue, you just gear up and you recruit another a set of muscles, don't you? The gap's now starting to come down even further. Tiesj Benoot driving hard on the front here.
Yeah, I think this is the point where Tiesj Benoot has to sacrifice himself for Laporte, because if they don't bring it back, they're fighting for 3rd place, and they want to win this one as well, to add to the 4 they already have this year. You know, it's not close enough for Benoot to be able to attack and guarantee that he's going to be able to get himself across. Well, that said, it looks like they're still hoping that sharing the workload between this group is going to get them back into the fold. It's just hanging in the balance, though, isn't it? We've got that one final cobbled stretch to come. They're not particularly bad cobbles, but it's still 9 seconds.
Yeah, and we know when fatigue seeps in, even though this race is relatively short, a cobbled, riding on the cobbles, it's like the inertia, the way that you ride the cobbles. If you're tired, you can make a difference by just accelerating away. And it is almost like climbing on the flat. It's a strange sensation, the amount of extra power you have to put through the bike. Of course, you've got the slipstream effect, but it is very, very difficult. 8 seconds is the gap. I think it might be even a little bit less than that as Alexander Kristoff takes his turn on the front. Meanwhile, another man in yellow, but for a different team, accelerates on the front, Laporte. But it's one of the riders from EF, can't quite identify him from here. Round the corner with a small gap, looks like it's Honore. He's got a very similar style to Nilsen Paulis from
actually,
a distance.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell them apart if you're not very close up in your camera shot. But yeah, it looked like Laporte in the yellow there of Jumbo-Visma really stretched things out in an effort to try and get across, either on his own or in a small group, and it did bring the gap down to the 4 seconds that you see now. Countering that, one of the riders from EF Education Easy Post, who've been on fire, let's not forget, throughout 2023. I think by the time they got to mid-February, they'd taken more total wins than the entirety of 2022. And they're in with a really good shout. You know, that neither of them are going to be able to out-sprint the likes of Laporte on a, well, let's say on paper, but they've got the opportunity to go on the attack. 2 seconds, we're being told. 2 seconds is a long way after this many kilometres in a Flemish one-day classic. And
it's a cross headwind on this particular section as well. They're still riding so what an absolutely thrilling edition of Dwars door of Vlanderen this has been. Jonathan Narvaez looks around. This is the last section of Pavé. It's only about 500 metres long, but could it make the difference in this race? Lazcano, the joint hero of this race so far from Movistar, on the drops, grimacing with the pain, thunders over the cobbles, making the Viking grimace too. And the gap still hasn't been closed. Tiesj Benoot on the front, 6.4 Ks to go, 26 seconds to the next group. They're about to enter this cobbled section. There's a real fight here, Dan, to get first onto this cobbles. 6.3 Ks to go. We've only got about 8.5 minutes of racing, 8 or 9 minutes of racing left.
Yeah, I think it's over, unfortunately, for what we're being told is the peloton. So Group 3 on the road. But it does look like these two are... No, I'm not going to speak too soon. I was about to say they're finally going to get caught. Shake of the head there from the Movistar rider Lazcano. I've been informed by Killian Kelly that the best result Movistar have ever had in this race was from Alejandro Valverde a few years back in 11th.
Ooh, I thought he was 13th, but great stat there, Killian. They're about to be called. Well, I think we do need to doff our metaphoric caps to Lazcano and Alexander Kristoff for putting on such a show. And to tell you what, Dan, 26 seconds. I wouldn't want to write off Alexander Kristoff yet.
Well,
he's a man who can turn himself inside out.
He's also the sort of man that could do 500 kilometres on the front and still have the same sprint as he would do after 2 kilometres.
I know, he's still a threat in this group. Lazcano on the front there, at the back of this group, wearing the blue kit from a different team. Valentin Madouas, what can he do? What conversations are being had? What information is being relayed to the riders from Groupama FDJ? 5.6 Ks to go, 24 seconds. And the interesting thing, you talked earlier on about Lotto Destiny going all in. They've now lost Jasper de Boist and Frederick Frieson. They've been ejected out the back, and it is Julien Alaphilippe now riding on the front for David Ballerini. Only 2 riders from Lotto, from Soudal Quickstep, should I say, in the group. 21 seconds, so Julien Alaphilippe, there's a big attack. On Ore goes, Benoot on his wheel, Madouas trying to shut the gap.
Oh, this is very similar to last year's race, where there's been so many different attacks, and when you just think that you know which way the race is going, it turns on its head again. I'm not sure if that's down to the design of the parcours or just by chance over the last couple of years, but this is a cracking race. Oh, look at Kristoff, just so close to being in with a chance of the win, and now he's grimacing, trying to get himself back on terms with this front group.
It's so cruel. He's not going to get any assistance at all from Christophe Laporte, is he? Probably won't get any from Stefan Kung either, because they both have representation in this little front group. But I tell you what, look at Lazcano trying to winch himself across this group. He looks across, shakes his head. He's going to be very near the end of what he can offer here today. 4.7 Ks to go, and the gap continuing to come down. Another move off the front from EF. I think Honore goes again. He indeed tries to stretch things out. Madouas stayed seated, just keeps his balance there, out of the gutter. And Quentin Erman's looking very sharp there. Laporte looks around, and look how calm, look how serene Laporte looks at the moment. Yeah. He looks very relaxed and well in control.
Yeah, he looked like he was out of the picture. You can see Benoot looking to see where his teammate was just a few moments ago. It all came back together once again. Honore on the attack. Now Laporte goes on the left-hand side of the road. Who's got something left to follow him?
Kung.
This could be it.
Oh, Christophe Laporte has gone. He's already won Gain of Evergan. What a race we have had. 4 kilometres to go now in Dwars, door of Vlanderen, and still it isn't done yet. We have had an absolute thriller of a race today. These Cobble Classics never disappoint, do they? But look who is on the front at the moment. Out of the front, Christophe Laporte has attacked. He drove clear, seated attack. It was, well, Stefan Kung who tried to get across the gap, but this man has just got too much under the hood. Whether it's uphill, whether it's on the flat, he is so strong and is opening up a gap on the group behind. 3.5 Ks to go. There's a couple of teams here with 2 riders. Dan, they're going to have to commit if they've got any hope of bringing him back.
I mean, the difference in body language when Laporte went versus the riders behind who were trying to latch onto the coattails as a Frenchman, it was significant, and I think it shows that Laporte has got the most strength and the most energy left of anybody in that group. As much as I would like this to still come down to the line, I think Laporte's just looking too strong, and he will also be determined to win a race like today outright. Having been gifted that race win at Gent-Wevelgem on Sunday by his teammate who was visibly stronger, I think this would feel so good for Christophe Laporte to win here today.
Oh, this is incredible. What a move by Christophe Laporte. I cannot see them closing down the gap now. Perfect race again by Jumbo-Visma, but it's Lazcano still there. This could be an incredible podium for the Spaniard, unless they get Winch back in again. But with 2.6 Ks to go, the man from La Seine-sur-Mer looks to be adding another win, unless something catastrophic happens here. Tish Benoot shepherding the group behind, but Lazcano is moving clear. Trying to see who is with him. It actually is the American Nilson Paulus. Lazcano actually distancing Paulus there. Still full of height here. 13 seconds, though, for Christophe Laporte, just in the space of a kilometre or so.
Yeah, just opened up like that, didn't it? It was an incredible seated acceleration from Christophe Laporte. Daylight opened up between him and everyone else immediately. Just 2 kilometres to go for the Frenchman from Jumbo-Visma, who won all 4 cobbled classics already this year. Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, Kuurne, Brussels Kuurne, E3 last Friday, Gent-Wevelgem on Sunday, and it looks almost certain to me they're going to add a 5th here today at Dwars, Vlanderen. Does it take the pressure off for Sunday, though? I think we were looking this morning, the last time that they'd won a Monument cobbled classic was 1997. 20. Well, it was 20 plus years ago. I can't remember the exact date, but it's been a long time since Jumbo-Visma won a big cobbled monument. I shouldn't start talking about that now because it's been such an incredible performance by them again today.
It has.
They'll want to appreciate what they're achieving here, but the pressure, I think, for them is still going to be huge on Sunday.
It will be, but Christophe Laporte, I think, is going to savour this moment. The Frenchman, the winner on Sunday of Gent-Wevelgem. There's clear daylight between Nilson Paulus and Oya Lazcano. Or Lopez flicks his elbow, urges the American to come through. This is a brave, battling performance by a rider that I think we'll be seeing a lot more of in the coming years. Perhaps a coming of age for the man who's already won in Wallonia. But what about this man out in front? Christophe Laporte, perfect team riding. He has placed one attack today, and that was the attack that looks as if it has taken him to victory. Another perfect ride by Jumbo-Visma. Will this group stay behind? It looks like the bunch has actually caught the chasers. This is going to be so cruel for Paulus and Lazcano. They go under the Flamme Rouge, but they only hold a slender advantage over the remnants of the peloton behind us. We see a mechanical again. It's Jasper Stuyven again. Such a shame for the Belgian. Well, he zips up his jersey. What a ride. Absolutely imperious performance from Christophe Laporte. At the moment he went, I said he looked relaxed, he looked composed, he looked as if he had, well, something spare under the hood, but this has been an absolutely perfect performance by Christophe Laporte. It's 5 from 5 from Jumbo-Visma. They are unbeatable on the cobbles in 2023. Laporte wins alone in fine style. An absolutely wonderful victory for Christophe Laporte and Jumbo-Visma. Who is going to take second place? This is a real keen battle for the final steps on the podium.
Come on, Lazcano.
But the man, Lazcano, is going to take this one. What a ride by Lazcano. Is he going to be mopped up on the line? Lazcano takes the second place. What a ride by the Spaniard. Paulus there in third, rounds out the podium. I think it was Jesper Philipsen who steals fourth place for Alpecin de Koning. A breathless win. And it's, well, one of my favourite second places of all time there, I think, Dan.
I mean, that's ride of the day right there, or at least man of the match. What do they call it these days? The most valuable player, MVP. Yeah, not a lot more you can say about Jumbo-Visma and this man, Christophe Laporte. They were just the strongest team today. They rode tactically very well, and Laporte had the most left in the legs towards the end. Once he went, nobody was going to be able to stop him taking the victory without it being gifted today.
When he went, and I'm sure we'll see the replay again, the moment that he went clear, a rider of the calibre, the class, of the strength of Stefan Kung just couldn't close the gap. It was just away, but he made it look easy, Dan. He did. He went away, and even when he was clear, just the way his countenance was relaxed, he looked almost serene as he moved clear. Jumbo-Visma are on another level, tactically, but importantly, physically as well. They can't get it wrong. Well, it sets things up quite beautifully for the Ronde on Saturday. Me and Dan enjoyed that. I hope you did too. Well, there we go. That had excitement aplenty, Dan, didn't it? And there we go. Was it an inevitable result? It certainly wasn't until 3Ks to go.
Second place
together.
wasn't inevitable,
no.
I've got to say. A corrections corner, actually, because he's not just the best placed Movistar rider ever at this race. It was actually the best ever Spanish finish was previously the 11th for Alejandro Valverde. So he's leapt up 9 places in the record books as Lazcano today. Yeah, a lot of us are going to be talking about Laporte, but I think a lot of people are going to be talking about the Spaniard as well. That was something you might see Christophe do, but I was not expecting it from Lazcano.
No, he clearly had something strong. There was a couple of telling moments when Christophe just looked across at Lazcano when just the last couple of kilometres before they were caught, and looked across as if he was saying, fair play, I'm impressed. And he holds on for a brave second place. But it's all about the winner. Here's
Christophe Laporte, félicitations. Quel doublé et la manière
what a
aussi.
double.
Ouais, c'est vraiment une super journée. C'était une journée vraiment difficile.
So, a difficult day, but a great day.
Super travail encore aujourd'hui. Toute l'équipe était assez incroyable. Et
all the keep were.
Ouais, je suis content de
Great. I'm very content.
Il y avait la cohabitation, la collaboration avec
Happy to win again.
Ouais, TJ était vraiment très fort dans les montées. C'est vraiment lui qui a fait
I was strong on the climbs.
La sélection dans les bosses. C'était le plus
I made the
fort dans les bosses
selections on the
aujourd'hui.
climbs.
Et après, ça a bien collaboré dans le groupe.
There was a good collaboration
Et il a commencé à avoir des attaques.
between the group.
J'ai su saisir ma chance au bon moment.
C'est incroyable, hein? Après Gand-Wevelgem, gagner cette course aussi.
Ouais, c'est vraiment.
Did you think you could win
C'est vraiment
this
incroyable. C'est
as
dur,
well?
c'est dur à réaliser encore. Mais voilà, la condition est bonne. Après ma maladie, j'ai su bien m'entraîner et revenir.
I've been training well.
Revenir bien, je pense que j'ai de la fraîcheur et j'en profite.
I think I'm fresh.
Et voilà, comme je le répète encore, on a vraiment une équipe très forte et ça pousse vraiment vers le haut.
À part de Bruges-La Panne, ça fait 5 sur 5 dans les courses de pavés pour Jumbo-Visma. C'est aussi incroyable.
Oui, c'est vraiment incroyable. C'est super d'avoir gagné les 5 courses pavées à part Bruges de Panne. On a fait deuxième avec
It's incredible to get 5.
Ça fait partie des plus grosses courses du début de saison et on les a presque toutes gagnées. Mais les deux plus belles arrivent aussi. Donc,
most famous race of the season on the pavé.
Garder le cap, on va faire de notre mieux. Ce ne sera pas chose facile.
It's not easy to do.
Tout ce qu'on a pour essayer d'arriver.
Je suis sûr que l'équipe va écrire maintenant que vous pouvez gagner aussi Flandre et Roubaix.
Ouais, je pense que.
Do you think you can win Flanders?
Il y a trois hommes qui sont quand même au-dessus du lot. Donc avec Wout,
we have 3 guys that are
et Van Der Poel, donc
that are on a different level. Van Der Poel, Wout, and of course Tadej Pogacar.
Au mieux.
But we think we'll be looking after well.
Merci beaucoup, Christophe Laporte.
Well, Dan, apart from saying he's in good shape, the team is strong, there's not a lot really to garner from there, apart from the fact that 5 wins in the 5 Cobble Classics is incredible. I'm trying to think, have Quick-Step in various iterations that he has ever done that? Have we seen a team, maybe we'll get killing?
I don't think any team's ever done it in the first 4, let alone the first 5 in a single year.
Absolutely incredible.
He's key to Sunday, I think.
Yeah.
In that everyone's going to be looking at Van Aert from that team, despite their other results and despite the fact that they've won these other races. I'll let you go down the top 10.
Well, there we go. Confirmation of the win to Christophe Laporte of Jumbo-Visma. A quite incredible second place by Oya Lazcano Lopez. Paulus in third there, his best riding a classic this year. Then we have Philipsen, Pedersen, De Lee, Ballerini, Pasqualon, Legac, and Nils Pollitt, the German champion for Bora Hansgrohe, rounding out the top 10. Well, Dan, this was the moment. One attack.
Well, he was out of the saddle for about
2
half
reps.
a pedal stroke, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
it was.
Then he sat down with enormous power. And look, that's Stefan Kung, one of the best time trials in the world, also powering away in the saddle. But I think if we had an overhead shot at this point, the gap would not be coming down. It would not be the same. It would be increasing. That was how powerful this man was once he went. And I think, as it often does in this point in a one-day classic, it's down to who's got the most strength left. You know, who's better on paper. You can sort of rip that up and throw it out the window. It's about who has found it easier up to that point in the race. And I think with the way that he went at the end, Laporte just hadn't been on the limit as much as the other rides in the group that he left.
It's clearly just in amazing shape, isn't he? They've got numbers, they've got a strong team, but to a man, they are just physically stronger than the rest. And that was illustrated there by just that one move. He attacked once and it was absolute, it was definitive, and it's given them 5 from 5, which sets things up, well, quite mouth-wateringly indeed for the Tour of Flanders on Sunday. So, Dwars door Vlanderen, edition number 77. This historic race has occupied several places on the calendar and now finds itself sandwiched quite neatly between the Ghent-Wevelgem and the Ronde. No previous winner on the start list. No Mathieu van der Poel, no Wout van Aert, and no Tadej Pogacar. And that meant that we're going to have a very open race. And a break went away pretty early on, containing Yevgeny Gidic of Astana, Michael Lazcano of Movistar, Lin Heinzke of DSM, Alexander Kristoff was also there from Uno X, Warp Van Hoof of Team Flanders, and Nicholas Dukowski, the Canadian for Q36.5 Pro Cycling Team. But behind, interesting tactical play by Trek Segafredo, a staccato style of racing, slow on the climbs, accelerating into the tailwind. Julien Alaphilippe was active. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be the day for Soudal Quick-Step at all. Tim Merlier, the Belgian national road race champion, coming to grief on a climb with about 70 k's to go. and was never to regain at the front of the race. Chris Narlins was also active for Israel Premier Tech, and eventually a group did go clear, which was essentially the counter-attack as the group out in front started to fragment. Nielsen Palace, Quentin Elmans and Tish Benut were the early protagonists, and that group was to coalesce into a 10-man group of some of the big pre-race favourites. With 29 Ks to go and the second group established, UAE Team Emirates, not being represented up in front, sent a couple of satellite moves, including Matteo Trentin and Tim Wellens. But meanwhile behind, the gap was coming down, but it was coming down very slowly indeed. Alexander Kristoff still battling out in front with Lascano of Movistar. Several accelerations on the final climb of the day to Nokore meant that the gap was slashed, and eventually, with around 6.5 kilometers to go, our brave duo of breakaway riders out in front. The last surviving riders from the breakaway were caught. Mikel Honore attacked, took with him Tish Benut, who looked sharp, strong all day long. Valentin Madouas was also there. But what a ride it was by Lascano, the Movistar rider, shutting down several gaps, and then with about 3.5 kilometers to go, his only attack of the race, Christophe Laporte, already the winner of Ghent-Wevelgem. And remember, Jumbo-Visma already the winner of every single Cobble Classic that 2023 had to offer up. They're about to win again. The Hansen lead by the end, an emphatic demonstration of raw power and tactical prowess from Jumbo-Visma to take back-to-back wins. And an absolutely thrilling battle for second place went to Lascano of Movistar. What a brave ride that was. He's delighted with that. Nielsen Paulus will be very happy as well with the third place. Last step on the podium for the man from EF, who's also had a fantastic year. We've got an interview now with, I think, one of the main protagonists of the day, Mr. Alexander Kristoff.
Alex, I think when the speaker, Radio Tour, said the composition of the breakaway, he was so surprised to see a number that he made a mistake and had to correct himself. What happened? What was the plan this morning?
Not really, but my sports director said yesterday, why you don't go in the break? Because I was a bit, say, how difficult can it be? So I tried one time and I made it. So yeah, I say it's not that difficult to make it.
And from there, how it happened? How you manage your effort?
I felt quite good, but in the final, I thought that we're gonna stay ahead of the pack, but they come really fast in the final, and I got a bit surprised with 1.5 K to go, and yeah, that I was not really ready to do a sprint because I was quite tired, of course.
However, when the first group came back, you were cooked already, or you knew?
Yeah, I was a bit cooked. And I was attacking there, and I didn't really have the legs to do the accelerations. I was good in the steady pace, but yeah, it was too hard then for me after a long day out. So I was happy I survived all the way to the final, but at the end the result for me was a bit disappointed after all this effort.
No surprise he was tired. This is the moment again. Christophe Laporte went, as Dan said, pretty much 1.5 pedal revs, and he was clear, but he did make it look so easy. An absolutely emphatic demonstration of timing it right. Stefan Kuhn.
Once again, you were in incredible shape here. Tell us a bit how it happened.
Yeah, track opened up the race after Trieux the first time, and from then on was full gas racing, attacks over attacks, but it was really hard. And in the end, not everybody was collaborating 100%, and yeah, it's a shame to be caught with 1 K to go, but yeah, in the end I just didn't have the legs to follow Christophe.
Are you happy with the condition then?
Yeah, now it's time to recover, and then we'll be ready for the Ronde.
Thank you, Stefan.
Interesting insight there from Stefan Kung. Did his best to try and shut the gap to the flying Frenchman, but ultimately there was nothing he could do. So 5 wins from 5. Can they make it 6 on Sunday? I tell you what, who would want to bet against them? Great shot there of the peloton, or the remnants of the peloton, been led around the final bend by Nils Pollitt. Beautiful juxtaposition of the victory the battle for the podium spots.
Your race, you were really
Yes,
careful
Phillips.
in the first succession of the climb. You were at the front.
Yeah, it was a nice race, hard one. Yeah, sadly we didn't end up in a winning position with the team, but yeah, that's racing.
It was a bit what happened when there was this group in the front, because we saw a lot of the group at the TV, not compulsory the bench. There were not enough teammates to bring back the bench.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys pulling, but yeah, it was not good enough for the victory.
When you arrive at the finish, you knew there was still someone at the front?
Yeah, I saw, yeah.
Thank you, Jesper.
Thank you.
Yeah, clearly, Phillips a little bit disappointed there, but ended up with 4th place on the day. I'm hoping we might get a bit of a chat with the man that was 2nd. It seems to have gone pretty well, down pretty well on social media. Brave performance there. Not just, I mean, we talk about brave performances, Dan. People get caught, they're brave, but it was strong. I think we might... Tish Benoot we've got coming up next. Perhaps deconstruct a little bit of the tactical play that went on today.
Votre journée sur le vélo, et on imagine la joie qu'il y a aussi pour Christophe de lever les bras à nouveau aujourd'hui.
Good day on the bike.
Ouais, j'ai attaqué dans les côtes là. Nous étions, je pense, 6 ou 7 pour partir avec
we
Christophe.
attacked on the 6th or 7th climb.
Dernière heure, j'avais pas les meilleures jambes. Après,
I didn't have the best legs.
ouais, j'étais un peu malade les derniers jours.
I was a little bit
Et
sick.
j'ai dit à Christophe, et j'ai essayé de,
I told
réagir
Christophe that
sur les attaques un peu pour le mettre dans un fauteuil. Et
to
puis,
attack because I wasn't feeling
il a choisi
brilliant,
le bon moment.
and he chose the best moment.
If you were in English, tell us about your race. You were really active. Tell us a bit, take us through and tell us a bit what was the idea.
Yeah, after back to north, I think Olaf Kooi was not there anymore, so we knew we had to go with the group. And when I attacked, I think 6 riders came with me with Christophe, and it was a good situation. Last hour, I didn't have the best legs anymore. A bit of a cold the last days, and I said it to Christophe. I reacted on the text to give him some rest, and then he took the right moment.
Christophe was probably the fastest man of that group, but he knew he would go to attack.
Yeah, you knew when there are the other teams also with 2, they would attack to come solo to the finish. So was good how we did it, I think. Yeah.
For you personally, how are you? Just 1 month after your victory in Kuurne, and just a few days before the run.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I took some confidence again today after my flat in Harelbeek on Friday. Now 3 days of rest, and if I'm 100% healthy again on Sunday, that will be good.
There we go. Even a slightly sick Tish Benoot, still riding well today.
I like that he said I wasn't feeling great.
Oya Lascano.
Oh, sorry.
Many congratulations. A terrific 2nd place. Did you surprise yourself?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I always have seen those classics from the television from home. It's are beautiful races. I'm so happy of my second place here. It's amazing.
This can be a breakthrough. Maybe you're the next Spanish sensation on cobblestones.
I don't think so. We still have good riders in the team. We have Cortina also. But yeah, it's very... No many Spaniards have done like a podium on those classics. But I think that those classics are more seen in Spain, and we'll hope that more people will come here and do a great job.
How did you manage to have enough power left after the breakaway to ride that finale?
I think that no one had any power. I mean, the people who were coming from the second group were also very tired. I mean, they are great riders, but anyone has anything left. So Jumbo had Jumbo is doing an amazing season, amazing classic season. They are playing their cards very well. But yeah.
Enjoy your 2nd place. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Get back, actually. They had a good ride the other day. Matteo Jorgensen and Cortina both finished in the top 10 the other day as well. So I think it's E3, wasn't it? So they've as I said at the start, they look like a different team this year, and a hatful of wins and some very important, significant rides. Because as you said before, it's very rare. We've never seen a Spaniard so high up. And look at the delight on his face. That's lovely to see. Great to see. There were 3 separate chairs rather than a small little 2-seater sofa there, Dan. So well done for Flanders Classics. It's time for some podium action and a continuation of the form of Nielsen Paulus. I know he would have dearly loved to have won this race. He's already tasted success this season so far, but another display of a blossoming of the career for this young man, a popular figure, a likeable rider. Takes his chances when he can. Third place for Nielsen Paulus of EF Education Easy Post. And second place for this man. 2 previous pro wins in the Tour of Portugal and the Tour of Wallonia. Also second in the Spanish TT Championships last year. And that doesn't really come as too much of a surprise. But a wonderful grin as he crossed the line. That is a very, very well-deserved second place there for Lazcano of Movistar. But what can you say about Christophe Laporte? Another win for Jumbo-Visma. Second win of the year for Christophe Laporte. Second Cobble Classic to add to his collection. Certainly augurs well for the squad. Who'd bet against them, Dan, on a Sunday? They really do look. Oh, this is just emphatically the team of the moment. Yeah. Other teams are going to be scratching their head. Every moment that's presented to them, that they take. It's not just strength, but they're riding sharply as well, aren't they?
It feels like this has got to be their year to be on the top step of the podium at the Tour of Flanders on Sunday and possibly again at Paris-Roubaix the week after. But it's an old cliche. Well, I don't know if it is. I'm not sure anyone's ever said this before, but Dwars door Vlanderen is not the Tour of Flanders. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's a very, very different race. And once you add Van der Poel back into the mix, once you add Pogacar back into the mix, even when you've got Van Aert to add back into the Jumbo-Visma team, it's far from certain, as we all know, that they are going to win on Sunday. I have a feeling they won't, personally. Despite what all of the form indicates, I just think that they will put so much pressure on themselves this coming Sunday because they haven't won it in so many years.
I think the odds in terms of the win rate in the Cobble Classics, just looking at mathematics, the odds must be stacked against them, despite the fact they're riding well. They're in this rich vein of form. And I know it just isn't as simple, it isn't as arbitrary as luck as flipping a coin. But with each win, the inevitability of losing a race becomes nearer, and it's just a statistical anomaly. But whether that comes on Sunday, whether it comes the week after, that remains to be seen. But what we do know is that we're really set fair. This has always been a race that's isn't the biggest of the classics, but it's an important indicator of what's to come to a degree, and also, as we said, right at the very top. Back at the start, Dan, an opportunity for other riders to shine, and we saw that. Nielsen Paulus, again, on the podium here, but in particular, Lazcano. It is a race that provides opportunity for those willing to take risks and have a bit of a gamble and get out and race their bikes, and that's what we saw today.
In many respects, it was nice to not have the big three here,
it was,
wasn't it? Because it really, really opened it up, and it starts to give you a full sense of what might happen on Sunday. Like, oh, they were strong, and they're looking a bit better than they were before. And then the reality hits on Sunday that, but they're not one of the big three. You know, once they go 150 kilometres,
it's another 90 Ks on. I mean, this was 183, relatively short by the standards of any pro classic, semi-classic.
It's Flanders, the longest Tour of Flanders in over 2 decades.
Longest 276,
It's a really long race on Sunday. It's getting up towards Milano-San Remo distance, but 3 times as hard in terms of difficulty to actually finish the thing. So. It's going to be a tough old race for everybody on Sunday. I dare say we're not going to have a huge number of finishes, especially if the weather's not great.
We're not. Well, the Tour of Flanders is coming up on Sunday at 10:30 Central European time.